Welcome, welcome, Wise Chat. It's Wednesday, October 16th, 2024. Producer Henry here saying thanks for joining us for Wisecrack Live. We got a special guest, CJ the X, today. Mike will be with us in just a moment, so go ahead, get comfy, lick that stem, and if you're watching on the clock, hopefully it's not too bad a day at work.
Hey, Wednesday, October 16th. But since not a lot of people are here, I'll say something contentious right off the bat. We're less than 3 weeks away from doing the same thing here in America. In 2016, there was this election and a thing happened, and everyone was like, "How could this happen? What happened? Democracy is dead. This is a mistake." Da, da, da. It's 8 years later, and the same thing's about to happen. Probably. Okay, I'm just going to be honest with you. That's what I think is going to happen. I don't want it to happen. I don't want it to happen, but I think the same thing gonna happen, and everyone's gonna be like, "What? We don't get it. We don't get it." And then a bunch of us are gonna be like, "No, we do get it. We do get it. It makes sense." And we're gonna be treated like, "Oh, it's some mystery, some mystery." And you know what the response of the Democratic Party is gonna be to the big fuck up? They're gonna be like, "In 2028, we need to run Mitt Romney as our candidate." It's good. Something like that's gonna happen. I'm just letting you know. But hey, it's Wisecrack Live. I'm Michael Burns here with producer Henry. Zanico, sorry that you have to miss the stream. It's going to be a fun one today. What's up, Mav? What's up, Black Dragon and Mam and Longton Bork and Casual Fox and Daniel and Beatmaster and Danger and Penny and Eddie and all these sorts of people who we love. Glad to have you here. It's going to be a great one. CJDX is coming on today. I think CJDX, I would say, is one of my favorite people on YouTube. Watching CJ's videos always makes me feel very uncool and kind of dumb. And I like that, I guess I'm just a sort of intellectual cuck, and that's how
Yeah,
I want
take
to
me out of
feel.
my element, please.
For sure. Julia, what's up? Good to see you. Julia's a Torontan, CJ Torontan as well. Is Torontan what one says? I don't know. Torontonian? Tarantula? I don't know. Later in the show, we're going to announce the winner of the first Yes Please coffee contest. I'm going to be honest with you. You know when people do the thing where they say they can't pick their favorite child or something? That is what this felt like. You guys really fucked me up with this because the submissions for the coffee contest were so good. So good. And the problem too is some of you who I just like a lot personally. What's up, Sean? Submitted. So I narrowed it down and I sent 3 of the options over to Tony at Yes Please. And I asked for help picking. So, that's where you go. Someone said CJ is why I'm here. Kaylee, great. CJ's gonna be here in a second. So thank you so much for being here. We're just gonna kind of get warmed up. Get the seat warm for old CJ. Yeah, Derek guy is great as well. And we'll play the winning submission and we'll play the finalist at the end of the stream today. So if you're someone that entered the coffee contest, you will find out later today if you want. And just a reminder, our coffee contest is sponsored by Yes Please. Yes Please is our official coffee sponsor. It's partner here at Wisecrack that makes one of the best goddamn coffee in the world. You can use code Wisecrack to get a discount. I'm going to post a link in the chat right now as well. I'll talk to you more about this later. But we've been working on this partnership with Verso Publishing, one of the best publishers for philosophy stuff. I'll wait till So there's in the chat right now. There's Yes Please stuff.
Threw the link on screen for the Verso stuff as well.
Oh, awesome. So Verso is one of the best publishers for philosophy, theory, critical theory, literary analysis books. They're great. They let us put a page together with some recommended books. If you use the code Wisecrack, you get 50% off all of these books, which is honestly a pretty good deal. And maybe later in the stream, we'll pull it up and I'll talk to you about the books and why I picked them. Before CJ gets here, I will say CJ put out a new video yesterday titled "How Jordan Peterson's Suits Taught Me Fashion." It's a cheeky title. They're doing something to you there. Let's look at some comments. As always, thank you to Rooster Henry for pulling these up. Which one's first for you? Great. Let me go to Whisker Dew says, and this is from our video on celebrity from Friday. When everyone is a commodity, our humanity becomes secondary to our ability to be profitable. Nasty bars. I'm going to be honest with you. I wrote that line. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. I thought that was good too. So I'm glad that Whisker Dons liked it. But it's true, you know? If we're all commodities to each other, our humanity is incidental and our profitability is primary. Okay, so this is Scott Davis Online. It was back in mid-July 2024. I was in the TSA pre-check line at Burbank Airport. Hell of an airport. Chapel Rowan was with a handler in front of me. Some dude was at the airport and had a stack of vinyl with him, demanding she sign them. Her handler kindly asked him to leave. The dude started to read, "Don't forget where you came from," like a stalker. Wife later told the musician and not yet had the infrastructure in place for fandom. That this person said their best airport celebrity encounter was the character actor Kurtwood Smith, who was delightful and witty. Also, this person, this is funny. This person, Scott, said they saw me in Mexico, and didn't want to kill my vibe. That was my honeymoon. And you know what? I'll say this. I said this the other day. If you see me in the world and you're not weird about it, say hi, especially if my wife's there. It'll make her think that I don't just talk to myself at the computer all day. One time in Brooklyn, we were in New York, and someone was walking up the street, and this guy went, "Hey, yo, Wisecrack." And I was like, "Yeah." And then he like walked up, and we did this like dap thing real quick. And I in that moment, I acted so much cooler than I was because I was like, "Yeah, what's up? Appreciate you," you know? And I just kept walking, and my wife was like, "Are we going to acknowledge what just happened? Are we going to acknowledge that like cool New York guy just acknowledged you and you acted like you were a cool New York guy?" And I was like, "Yes, just let me have this. Just let me have this." Sonic Goo has a comment. Sonic Goo is that I almost made a sex joke about Sonic the Hedgehog, and then I pulled back. The best way to be famous is in non-pop fields, like a big name architect, scientist, or painter. All the awards and the money, a lot less hassle. I agree. The other way to be famous would be to live in LA or New York and be an actor in a CBS show, because nobody in major cities watches like CBS crime procedurals, but they're the most popular shows in the country. So you could be like the FBI agent in some CBS show called like Hutch, because you're like Agent Hutch or something, and you could be making $1 million an episode, and you could go to places and no one would know who you were because no one watches that shit. You know what I mean? I think that would be cool too. Cedric Justice says, "Thanks for his perspective on celebrity and commodity. I've always wondered why people got upset with celebrities for being human or political. Now you've clarified it. It's supposed to be a commodified backdrop for you to project your values on, which is icky, isn't it?" Yeah, guys, celebrities don't owe us anything. And that's okay. It's okay. And our friend Aoife Hilton, our sort of like Australian correspondent. But Aoife, not to get too much into your business, Aoife, I feel like Aoife's, like Irish American, Australian, really a worldwide phenomenon. Said Yarvin's main problem in that video seems to be that the media investigates tech companies and not the other way around. I wonder whether he understands that that's a journalist's job and not an app developer's job. Yes. Literally what journalism is supposed to do. Thank you as always for your comments. We appreciate it. We read them. I was accused of not looking at comments at one point. I was accused of not caring about what people say, and that's just not true. It's just not true. we have someone said, is the stream cutting? Is everything good?
It seems all good on my end. I hope your connection's all right out there.
Okay, yeah, I just saw a comment. Okay, cool. We have a video coming out on Friday, guys. That's a kind of deep dive on Curtis Yarvin, on Catholic integralism, on um, some weird tendencies in the far right theological space. So I'm excited about it. Coming out on Friday. Obviously, patrons, you're going to get that tomorrow. It dives deeper into some of the stuff I talked about with Matt McManus on Monday. Well, two guests this week. This is big for us. So definitely be on the lookout for that. As always, you can hit us up at wisecracklive666 at gmail.com. We read your emails. We check them out. We look at them, things of that nature. We got some positive emails about the Matt McManus appearance. We got some recommendations of stuff to watch, so I really appreciate that. We like to get video recommendations from you all. Thank you so much. Yeah, Catholic. Someone said your immune system is a punk. Talking about me? Oh no, talking about a guy that knows. Let's see. Yeah, John Braun said Catholic integralism. Thank you so much, Emigre Esquire. Yeah, Catholic integralism is this view that the state should be subsumed into the church, and that the structure and the principles of a certain, like pre-Vatican II conservative version of Catholicism should be the law of the land. It's a political theology in which one can justify flogging heretics in the street, and one in which laws based on theological interpretation would have precedent over democratically decided upon laws. So it's pretty sick. Pretty sick. Great. I'll say one thing before we bring CJ on, just to tease you more for Friday's video. Two things in Friday's video you're going to see. One, some of these weird Catholics argue that technically slavery could be legit. Two, some of the weird right-wing evangelicals think that mermaids are real and they're whores created by God to tempt Christian men. This is all real stuff. Dr. Clownick has brought up the Behind the Bastard thing. Yeah. So I would say like the Behind the Bastard thing, if you liked that on Yarvin, our video is more like dissecting his ideas. So I think they're complementary. Because when I before we finished the video, I watched the Behind the Bastards thing because I wanted to make sure we weren't stepping on any toes. Only because Robert Evans, the host of that, always tweets about having guns, and I don't want him to get me. So it's a very different thing. Well, hey, and thank you, Clockwork Man. Since they're here, let's bring CJ the X onto the show. Like I said before, one of the YouTubers that makes me feel uncool and unsmart in a way that I like. Often this always happens, and it's fine. Oh yeah, the name of Wisecrack's second channel is so easy. It's Wisecrack 2. I wanted to name it something really dumb and weird, and eventually realized we should just do Wisecrack 2. Yeah, y'all, show me the meaning. Movie podcast. Back in that ass. It is going down on Tuesdays, streaming at 5 p.m. But you can watch it whenever on VOD. It's also getting uploaded to podcast apps and things of that nature. You know,
Hi, sorry.
you did it.
I'm in.
You're in, and we got a piano in the room. We got a
Yeah.
guitar
Do
in
I
the
look
room.
normal? Do I look all right here? Is this fine?
You look well lit.
I know this is a sunbeam directly on my goddamn face. It actually is not very good. Like you'd think sun is good for, but not for this.
Yeah.
Not like this.
I mean, good for you in terms of mental health.
Yeah, that part's
probably.
good. Yeah.
Yeah, and then the real question. Okay, so let's see. We have Miles Davis. I'm trying to see if I can determine the other two records.
Yeah, go
from
for
this
it. Can
tiny
you
screen.
see it?
God, it's really hard. No, tell me what the other two are.
Okay, that's Carly Rae Jepsen's Emotion and King
Oh.
Cruel 6 Feet Beneath the
Oh.
Moon.
Okay, so the honest thing is I was never gonna get Carly Rae Jepsen. The King
That's the
Cruel
most
thing.
important one. You see, it has the place of honor. It's the highest one.
I know. I see. I've only seen the two the side boys. I've seen them, but the queen
Yeah.
on top, I have not. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. Thank you for having me. Yeah. You know
Yeah.
what I like about the fact it's on Discord?
What do you like
I
about that?
I can't see the live chat. Thank God.
That's great. Yeah, you don't want that's not you shouldn't have to worry about that. I feel like that is our burden, but I'll say this. We have one of the only chats that's like nice and cool.
Really?
Yeah, I'm actually very proud of this. We've cultivated a community where even sometimes when people show up to troll, they'll try to engage and be like, "Well, hey, maybe explain fascist principle you just outlined for all of us." And I've seen like because I've been on the wrong side of some prominent people's communities in the past year, and I've seen how their people act, and I'm
Yeah.
just very proud that our community are not bullies, and they're
Well,
not
that's
like
good.
obsessive.
And you know, I think it's one of those things with content creators. I think that people don't they aren't aware of, or they would not like to admit how in control of their community's tone they are. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because people kind of talk like this freak thing happens when you have an audience where the audience suddenly is like evil or mean or horrible or uncharitable or irritating in some way. And I'm like, you probably, if you're being honest, modeled the behavior that your audience has found acceptable, right? Like they're kind of
100%.
parroting you, you know? So I think a lot of those communities, I just saying that it makes sense to me that you have cultivated that. I feel good about my audience too, to be honest, because you kind of just let them know what is okay to talk about and what's not, and how it's okay to talk and how it's not. Like you just model it.
Yeah, I mean, your audience is cool because there was a thing. I think after you talked to me on your Patreon, there was a little. I could tell there were some people that I think probably checked out our stuff after that, and
Right.
like anyone that mentioned you were like, "Oh, came here after seeing and talk to CJ." Where they were just like nice and normal. And I've had the same thing. There's a lot of creators in the space who like when we first started. I've done some stuff with Alice Capel before, and her audience always cool. Tom Nicholas, audience always cool. Like you can just tell there's people that cultivate that. And I do think you're right that there's it's a weird sort of like not my fault. And it's one thing if one person from your community acts like a sociopath, but when it's a chronic problem, like come on. Come on.
When it's a chronic problem, you have to start to think about, what I had something that I threw away, and I'm not going to get too deep into this even in the slightest, but it was something about like, it was some clip of Destiny
Mm-hmm.
where it's like
Mm-hmm.
when you find yourself in this like perennial loop of like drama and yelling at your own commenters and like, what I mean, just constant conflict. It's like at some point you're kind of begging for it. You know what I mean? I mean, it's also
Yeah.
the same thing with like, I don't know. What you manifest is just so often a reflection of your values. Sorry, not to bring up Jordan Peterson too early also, but like, something he likes to say also is that he's like not a disagreeable person. He finds conflict very stressful. He likes to say this all the time, right? And I'm like, but yet you clearly value being in conflict. Like you clearly value like stoking more combat. There's something about like the luster of warfare that attracts you because you're constantly manifesting it, and you are completely in charge of your ability to disengage or speak more peacefully, or what I mean, not get involved in shit all the time. You got to be in love with it a little bit. Your
For sure.
values,
Yeah.
they manifest.
I'm gonna say a Peterson thing, and I'm gonna pull away from Peterson, and then we can get back to Peterson. But because we're going to talk about him. But I mean, yeah, it's interesting that he says stuff like that. But then even the language that he uses to describe people he disagrees with isn't like I disagree with this figure. It's like they're a bloody homicidal nightmare of a thinker.
Yeah, it's gross.
It's just you can't do that. So I finished. I started your most recent video yesterday at the comfort of my home. I
Yes.
finished it, and this is bad. I'm going to admit something bad, and everyone
Yeah.
who's watching, don't live like me. I finished it in my car ride to work today. I didn't watch the whole thing. I had my phone kind of set up at an angle. But listen, guys, is LA traffic. I was barely moving for most of the time. So I just want to, honest with you, it's a thing that I did that isn't good. So very exciting to talk to you right after that. And I know that as we were loading today, a bunch of people in the chat were just saying they had just finished that video or watched it and were excited to hear more about it. It was an interesting one, like reading the title of the video, how Jordan Peterson's suits taught me fashion. I see what you did there. That's fun. did not know what to expect going into it. I have a lot of thoughts on this one. I mean, to be really self-centered about it, my initial thoughts when I finished it were like, wow, I didn't know. I mean, I knew that we had some of this in common, but I felt like I understood you better, and I like that you make videos that sort of I guess where your like subjectivity interacts with overlaps of the content in a way that feels very, very genuine and emotive, and sort of what's the word I'm looking for? I'll think of it later, like effective in a certain way.
Mhm.
Um, but I was like, wow, hip hop culture, philosophy, and Christianity seem to be three things that in
Yeah.
various ways have been formative aspects of my identity and way I think about the world and yours. Especially
Yeah.
interesting because we're separated by a solid generation or so. So
Yeah.
I do have thoughts on all that, but maybe if I could ask you this first, what sparked that video? Or like, and I don't know in general how you think about stuff, how you come up with ideas, but if you can describe it, what was like the thing that got the ball rolling for this idea?
Um. Well, it's Derek Guy's viral tweets, of course.
Uh-huh.
And so seeing that viral, I fell into this thing where like people knew that I was doing some sort of research project on Jordan Peterson,
Yes.
and so uh, and so I felt, but then also I'm off of Twitter, right? So like I have this thing where like my social network, like my friends, my close friends, will they send me personally like direct links towards crap on social media that they think I should see. So because I don't have the social media, so I just don't get it. So it's like if there's something happening, they just send it to me. It's really nice because I get this personal relational curation of stuff I
Yeah.
might be interested in from human beings that I know. That's nice. The less nice portion of it is my friends, all sorts of my friends, even ones that are not involved with that don't know that much about my work, they'll still send me like tweets of like Jordan Peterson's and things that he has done recently. And it's like that thing. It's this clip. It's one like Dave Chappelle bit where it's like someone's like because he says he's talking about at one point like he said some sort of lukewarmy like after Trump got elected like we got to give him a chance. We got to give him
Yeah,
a
yeah,
shot.
yeah.
Like
It was
something
his
something.
SNL monologue. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And then so in one of his later specials, he's like now he's like he'll go to the barbershop and people will be like, "Yo, Dave, how's your boy?" And he's like, "Whoa, it's not my boy, it's not my boy." And so, anyways, that's how I feel about the Jordan thing now. Is people will send me things and it's like, "Hey, what's this about?" And I'm like, "Listen, I don't know. I'm not the authority on this, and maybe I don't want to have Jordan Peterson news freshly delivered to my doorstep every day like a dead bird." But this particular one, I thought like first of all, I think it was sent to me because someone's just like, "Oh, this is your boy. This is funny." But as I was reading into it, like as soon as I genuinely like read that bit, dress is not an art project. Like I got this
Mhm.
sense that I was like, I think I'm gonna really enjoy this because I'm always just tend to be attracted to useful kind of intersubjective takes on art that kind of push back against like the kind of shrug, oh, it's all your in your opinion, it's all your opinion, it's just whatever, it's what you individually arbitrarily like intuitively, and that's what art is, so anytime people have some deeper kind of way to discuss art that actually like gives us like kind of a common language and lets you dig deeper than your own like immediate intuitive subjectivity, I become attracted to it. And yeah, I don't know. I just think I've always longed for in art and in life, like something to hold on to, you know.
Mhm.
And so I've always yearned for that. So I had a sense that this was going to be valuable, and I started digging deeper into Derek Guy and reading his writing and stuff. And then I found myself genuinely compelled, and like it actually started changing how I dress. And so I just wanted to share that for people for whom that would be useful. I think it's funny because he's like the menswear guy with all these viral
Yeah.
tweets. So it's cute to give it like some sort of art object that hopefully does a decent job of like crystallizing it, like giving everyone a easy thing to look at instead of just scrolling endlessly through his Twitter, like I've been a little bit. So that
Yeah.
was one side of it, and then it was tying over to other philosophical stuff that I'm sure we'll get into later, the spiritual stuff, basically.
Yeah. No, it was great. And I think like too, it's always fun to see something that, I obviously am to like a clinical, not a clinical point, but a point that I don't like. I think about Jordan Peterson, too much. And I've obviously thought about his fashion way too much over the past 6 months or so since he started dressing, like you noted in your video, like a Batman villain. Um, then I've also followed Derek Guy's tweets and found his sort of take really interesting because it's not often that you have like a like menswear influencer or voice that will also go on, you know, long Twitter threads about the importance of like social housing and stuff like that. I think
Yeah.
because I had a period when I was younger where I got into, and this is the segment of the show where I age myself. In like 2007, 8, 9, 10, there was sort of like a revival of it was like almost like ironic preppiness in a
Mm.
certain sector of menswear. And I think this was kind of around like musically. I think about, when like Grizzly Bear was first coming out and a lot of bands of that like Brooklyn era where all of a sudden, rather than hipster sleaze, it was button down shirts and boat shoes and all this sort of stuff. And there were so many Tumblr blogs that were just like pictures of the Kennedys at the Cape in the mid '60s with people being like, "That's
What
the vibe."
year are you talking about here? Is this kind of post hipster, like hipster actually genuinely being in vogue, or is it during or
Um,
before?
I think this would be post what I consider hipster. So, like in my mind, I would consider the initial hipster era to be like basically like post 9/11,
Yeah.
um, through like maybe 2007, 2008. I feel like around
Everyone just saw 9/11 and they were like, I gotta start listening to Animal Collective.
they're like 9/11 happened. I need bands. I need trucker hats. I need PBR. I need irony in my t-shirts. I need to be really skinny and smell bad. All that sort of stuff. And then I feel like the reaction against that was, you know, rather than being like dirty, we're gonna like dress nice. But we're not Wall Street people. We're not finance guys. And like when I was in grad school at a point, I would wear like ties all the time and had a
Yeah.
bunch of cool blazers. But the thing that eventually disillusioned me was sort of the emptiness of the discourse around some of the, I guess, like early wave bloggers and Tumblr accounts and stuff associated with that. The sense
Yeah.
in which like it was hard sometimes to be, reading like psychoanalysis or existentialism or Marxism stuff all day and then think about the sort of what at the time seemed like a really aggressive, blatant like commodity fetishism, this
Right, right.
obsession with like commercially made things, and especially in so much as they signified um like class. And I kind of had like an aggressive reaction against that, um, which my wife will recount by saying like the first 2 months I knew you, you dressed so well, and then just something happened, and then for a decade you were just wearing like hoodies all the time.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but something that I did like about your video is and I think this is what's interesting about like Derek Guy, is sort of complicates a kind of easy but reductive dialectic between fashion is, corporatized, commodified, be like everyone else culture, and to really be yourself is to like not care and wear sackcloths and ashes.
Yeah, right.
Um, and I think that the way in which you with the video, and again, everyone watch the video. If you haven't, don't watch it now. Watch this, then watch that.
Yeah.
Um,
Watch me. I'm
b-
here now.
yeah, but I think you did a really good job of connecting it to, I don't know, I think like a search for cultural identity and looking at the way in which how we think about fashion and aesthetics can like situate us within, if not like a literal community, like a cultural lineage. And I think
Mm.
especially like the parts of the video where you get into your mom throwing out some like 80s music references at you, and attendees of a show telling you about David Bowie,
Yeah.
and things like that. But so is that something like, have you always existed in this space where you understood or felt like there was that sort of value culturally and almost philosophically to fashion, or is it something you had to kind of think through?
Well, fashion always eluded me. That's the thing is I'm an
Mhm.
interdisciplinary artist. I love engaging in a lot of different mediums, and fashion just always was out of reach for me for some reason because it seemed like it was either this, like you said, this hyper consumerist kind of I just need to memorize a bunch of brand names and like
Mhm.
listen to a bunch of people kind of nasal gave and circle jerk each other about whatever
Yeah.
like the new cool thing is, and it's all just like, and it's so expensive, and for what? Like I was just like, what's guiding this? It can't just be like, what do people think is cool, because that kind of fractures endlessly in every direction, and like it just didn't compel me. But it always confused me too, because like I'm an artist and this is the whole medium of art that's just not hitting, that I can't
Mhm. Mhm.
speak in, like something about it's missing me. Um, And so I was always with fashion, I just always felt like I was missing something. And so ever since I found Derek Guy, I finally found my access point.
Yeah.
And we can kind of talk about like why that is, but like I
I
think
would love that.
broadly, since I don't know, an outright how do I say this? I think that there's a lot of things, and like you were talking about this, what is it, Catholic integralism? Is that what you're calling it?
Yeah.
Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
And our first conversation too, like over on my Patreon, we were talking about like Christianity, right? So this is an example. I think of some of my presence online is to maybe snatch some things out of the maw of the right side of the culture war that like people presume are kind of intrinsically associated with like kind of regressive oppression or like the desire to assert a monoculture that just so happens to be very like Western and white or something, right? And I think that so a lot of sometimes what I'm doing online is like taking some of these things and being like, that's not like theirs, right? Like, like Christianity doesn't just immediately transform you into like a bigot. There's all of liberation theology. There's a whole left side of Christianity, right?
Yeah.
And there's always this kind of tension, like you kind of described, between, either talking about fashion, right? And talking about like the evolution of fashion, there's this tension between like we can either learn the dominant philosophy, we can learn the dominant aesthetic, we can just like opt into the status quo of like kind of rich established cultural language and try to speak it as competently as possible and win in the like hierarchy as it currently exists. And then there's this other option where you can be like, I challenge the legitimacy of the whole hierarchy. I'm going to rebel against it and not play by its rules, not try to succeed. I'd rather just form like a new kind of game, And there's always this kind of tension between like, well, which thing should you do, And I think what you're describing is like, when you're like, oh, this feels like icky, this feels consumerist, and you're like, I'm opting out of the game. I'm going to do something different and kind of reject this whole like valuation rather than like become competent within it. But there's like a balance, because part of submitting yourself towards like a kind of common language, like it just keeps happening whatever direction you turn, you know what I mean? So like if you're really into noise music, there's going to be a whole kind of value set of what people go for when they listen to noise music. And if you're really into painting, then or it depends on what era of painting, what kind of art are you into? And then each of those different games have their kind of own rule sets and their own kind of values and priorities and stuff, right? And what I'm kind of suggesting is like when you try to shrug off every single game, when you try to go like all of it's problematic, I want to just like have like bits and pieces of whatever I like without kind of going along with any of these social rules that are imposed upon me. I think when you try to shrug off every single game, then you actually end up alone, and that's kind of this sad thing that happens that I want to push back against, right? So there's this thing where like I'm totally down for like the increasing of like individual freedom and like the challenging of like oppressive static hierarchies. Totally down, because I think that like these things are good for art. They expand art. They are like what is it? Like representation is innovation. I think Kim Belair just said that in like an XOXO talk. I 100% believe that. But a lot of what I think our job is now, and the job of everyone is all the time, is like, okay, how do we let go of the bad parts of this while taking all the best ideas? How do we keep doing that? You know what I mean? And so I have found for myself, like some of these things that we could dismiss entirely as just being problematic as they're tied to class. There's also positive elements. And so we should try to do away with the oppressive, like class stratifying elements of it, the like bigoted ones, and try to take on the positive elements. So, it's just more complicated also when you start to dig into the history of it. Like something Derek Guy talked about, that I talked with Derek Guy in my interview that's on Patreon, is like, the suit, we think of it now as a symbol of like upper class stiffness or something. But for a while, like at first, the business suit was actually the working class uniform that was differentiated from the frock coat, and that was the upper class uniform. And in addition to that, like it was homogenizing in terms of class that actually concealed it because everyone ended up wearing the same uniform. So it actually had this kind of element of solidarity attached to it. It's just that over time, these things change. And these days, like the people that were wearing the business suit in the first part of the 20th century as like this kind of working class uniform, a lot of those people got really rich. And so then now the business suit became this like, this emblem of the upper class and of the elite. It became like its own tool for like asserting your kind of dominance or conscription to the monoculture or whatever, right? So, anyways, it's just it's more complicated. You know what I mean? Than just being like.
And I like the theological metaphor there, Augustinian metaphor. But starting from that point of when we see, for example, people that lead with their faith in the culture do bad stuff, it's easy for our brains to simply be like, oh, their primary identification is Christian. They do and say bad stuff. Thus, the whole category of Christian is bad. I'm going to push that away and reject against it. When you do that, we miss out on a lot. And we talk more about that.
Ground, importantly, right? That's the biggest thing for me is like when people are like, Jordan's bad because he's a religious nut job. I'm like, hey, I'm Christian and I'm not willing to let this dude have Christianity. I'm staying in the game because I would rather expand the borders of that thing or change minds about it. Like I want to fight for the soul of Christianity. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Not just abandon it.
Well, even to zoom back to the fashion thing quickly.
Yeah.
I think like the point of entry to what you're talking about, or the point in my life in which I started to see that more, was actually in food more so than fashion. Because I think fashion and food are two of the F words that are associated with opulence, with class, with decadence, with the rich.
Yeah.
You have people wearing expensive clothes to eat at fancy restaurants where people treat them like the little princes and princesses they are. But when you start to learn more about culinary history, it's not just like the consumptive practices of rich people. It's connected to places and people and history and cultures. And you learn that the people that have produced food historically are normally like working class people that are ingrained in certain communities. And that was a time for me where I was like, okay, I can enjoy this set of things and they're not bad just because rich assholes also like these things.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And I think, fashion is similar. There's a period where I was just like, for lack of a better term, the most annoying dudes I know are really obsessed with this. Thus it is bad. But realizing that like in the same way that food or high-end dining isn't just a consumptive practice that has to do with culture and aesthetics and taste, fashion itself, like you obviously know much better than I, and you get it in the video, is a sort of aesthetic practice. It's a way of finding identity, a way of finding community. And one thing that you said in the video, which I probably out loud said like, fuck, which sorry to say that, as a Christian, I know language like that deeply offends you, but it was talking about this feeling of growing up, being deeply engaged in the internet. And God, when you referenced Dat Piff as well, I was like, you know what? We're not that so far apart in age. I didn't know that the kids were on Dat Piff like that. But the sense in which you were able to access and find points that you culturally identified with via the internet, but the desire for you wasn't, I've constructed this identity and now I feel good. It was that like, no, but I want to share this. Like I want to have, if I was reading the video correctly, you didn't want to just like be alone in your room liking certain stuff and having an identity form that way, but you wanted to look at some of these, I guess, like aesthetic ideas, principles, tendencies, more as like related to community or something like that. And I'll tell you the lens I processed that through, and you can tell me where I got it wrong or how you think about this. But very much related to that, because I'll give a personal anecdote here. My first day of 9th grade. Wait, did you go to? Have you been in Canada your whole life?
Yeah.
Okay. This is the stupidest question I'll ask all day. Is like high school shit the same there? Is high school like 4 years? Okay.
9th to 12th. Yeah.
Yeah. So, the UK is a little different. You guys are half and half, so you never know. But when I started 9th grade, I was so obsessed in the years leading up to that with all these elements of like hip hop culture and like early 2000s fashion that I begged my mom to drive me to like a cooler mall in the city, which I'll just be blunt here. It was the Black Mall, where like cool young Black people hung out and there was cool stores. And I went and I constructed an outfit. I think the brands at that time, people wearing a lot of Mecca, cross colors was still a thing. FUBU was kind of like hit or miss, but constructed an outfit that I felt so great about that reflected these interests that I've largely developed via like magazines, hanging out at record shops, going on message boards. I got off the bus to go to school, and within seconds, I had that feeling of like I've made a huge mistake. Uh, that's- I realized that I had like sort of constructed an outfit based on a bunch of cultural signifiers that I identified with, but in a way that wasn't really grounded in like community,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that it didn't make me feel more connected to actual people. It made me feel in a sense like more isolated
Yeah.
from like
Yeah.
actual humans.
Yeah.
And I flashed that memory during, that chunk of your video and thinking about that tension between how we construct personal aesthetics, how we relate to culture, but then how we relate to people, and how in some cases it feels like, especially with everything being mediated via the internet, we've missed out on a huge part of the importance of like culture and aesthetics being a communal practice and not just a
Yeah.
matter of like individual identification.
Yeah. The something that I sometimes was thrown around on in like my lectures that I've done. Like I've done a couple live lectures now. And
Yeah.
one of the things that I talk about sometimes is the difference between your constitutional and aspirational taste.
Mhm.
And so
Hmm.
like and in that, like, you get to decide what kind of culture you want to emulate and participate in. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
you have the freedom to do that. Like well, to put it very obviously, like I didn't like grow up wearing this. At some point, I decided to opt into this. You know what I
Yeah. Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
Whatever I'm currently wearing. But then there's also this other side, which is like, well, what are you? So it's like, what do you want to be? What do you value? And like, what do you want to be involved in? How do you want to look? How do you want to express yourself? What resonates with you? What sets your soul on fire? But then there's of course also this other side, which is that like what am I? Um, like 2000s Disney rock music is
Uh-huh.
pretty, like, even though I would never want to kind of publicly identify myself like that, and I wouldn't want to make that music, it's not really what I'm into. But something in my bones moves like real deep down when I hear "Play My Music" by the Jonas Brothers in Camp Rock. I'm like, oh, that is me, because I'm like a suburban kid kind of glued to the television,
Yeah.
you know um, so yeah, anyways, it's just being able to differentiate between those things and just knowing that they're meaningful, because there's nothing, especially these days, there's little stopping you, like increasingly over time with the internet and with everything. There's little stopping you from dressing in streetwear and like
Uh,
dressing in good streetwear. Like you're allowed. But it's just useful to realize like which things are like, this is what like moves my soul. I want to move
mhm.
towards this. I love this. This gives me rapture. This is my like kind of personal subjective rapture. And
Yeah.
then what you're like coming from, and it's not particularly up to you. So this is another thing about the Christianity thing, right? Is like,
Mhm.
for massive swaths of people, I talk to them all the time, because obviously just with my content, like who comes sometimes into like my community or my Patreon, or who emails me, are people who are kind of like raised religious and then
Mhm.
moved away from it because they realized a lot of kind of problems built into it, and the way that people were using religion was oppressive and kind of like uh, thinly veiled kind of gloss, like of just other human beings told them that God wants for them what obviously just the mortal talking to you wants. You know what I mean?
Mhm. Mhm.
God being used as a tool to control people, and to hurt people, and to tell you that you're, like for example, like if you're queer, that like you're going to hell. It's like such a horrible, horrible way to use religion, in my view. It's not. It's not.
Yes. I
It's a
agree.
nightmare. And so,
Yeah.
but if you then turn away from religion as a result of this trauma, of this oppression, of these horrible experiences, it's this thing where it's like the Jonas Brothers Camp Rock song, where it's like still sometimes that God language, it stirs something in your soul, because it's not exactly up to you, the cultural languages that you were raised in. It's not exactly up to you, what stirs you at that deep level, like what built you, what shaped your sensibilities. And so, I just try to be conscious of that. You know what I mean? And I don't know. I don't know how that relates exactly to what you were saying. Think it's because if hip hop culture for you and me was not
Yeah.
something we were completely organically raised in, but it's a
Yeah.
passion, it's an interest area, then
Yeah.
it's totally fine to care a lot about that culture. I think that it's then your responsibility to actually care about the culture, right? There's a difference
Yeah.
between kind of appreciating and appropriating when it comes to it, right? Like I make hip hop music, and part of what that meant for me was I needed to really learn hip hop music. So I know quite a bit about like the history of hip hop, and I did my listening. Like I did, this is what I'm saying is like, if you have an aspirational taste that's maybe outside of your immediate familiarity, it's not just about consuming all the things you like. You kind of have a job to do. You have to enculturate yourself, you know?
Yeah.
And, you know, and you're in jazz and in hip hop, like it's just broadly, it is true. It's like, you got to know that this is a black genre. It comes out of Black American history. You better know
Yeah.
some of that, because otherwise you're not honoring the culture, you know?
Yeah. Well, I
And
think too is like, yeah. And being from like outside, I can start with the hip hop thing a little bit more from, existing in a, racial, social context outside of the space where that art is produced. It's sort of like you do have to, I guess, like earn the right to participate in those communities by showing that you care enough to show that it's not just something you're into because it's like cool or signifies something. And I know for me, like I've talked about this a few times recently on this show, like that was like one of my entryways into learning about politics and society in a broader way. I
straight
remember
up.
like
Yeah, yeah,
listening
yeah.
to especially like underground rap music when I was much younger, like talking about issues of like class and race and police violence. And this is not stuff I would hear if I just listened to like Pearl Jam or
Yeah,
whatever
yeah,
it might have
exactly.
been,
Exactly, yeah.
And and then there's kind of the pathway where you could listen to that stuff and just be like, "Oh, that's cool, that's badass, that's whatever." You could be like, "Oh, this is like reflective of a place and a space and a politic." And there's such like a rich history there. And obviously like jazz that times a billion. If you go down the jazz rabbit hole, it's just like
Yep.
connected to everything. And I mean to kind of
I think
oh
honestly, if
god.
you're interested in pop music, if you're interested in music now, you're interested in Black history. And I
Yeah.
truly believe this. Like, if you're going to play fucking any kind of music, then you need to learn about Black American history, because that's the
Yeah.
people from which all of these art forms came. Because talking about jazz history, right? The way that there'd be like a Gershwin show tune, and then there'd be some nightclub where people are taking those show tunes and they're stretching the harmony and altering it and turning like jazz into a genre. And then you realize that like this stretching and alteration of harmony, this experimentation, the brilliance of these Black artists created all of the tools that we still use in music today. You're gonna talk about R&B, you're gonna talk about rock and roll. Fucking all of it comes from Black American culture, right? So I went
Yeah.
to jazz school, right? So I went to jazz school. I care about rap music. I'm a producer, and I'm into pop. I'm into good pop. And like the thing about these things is they're not just noises. And this is kind of where I push back sometimes. It's what I'm not trying to make some grand metaphysical ontological argument about art being subjective or objective. I'm a pragmatist. What I kind of care is like what does saying art is objective or art is subjective kind of encourage you to do? And sometimes my shrinking away at the art is subjective thing is it encourages people just to kind of like shrug and just be like, it's all about what you intuitively like. And I'm like, there's more depth to art than that. And one of the biggest things is that, these sounds, these traditions, these forms, these art objects did not come from nowhere. They came from human beings in actual context. So one of the beautiful things about falling in love with hip hop music, for me, of course, is you end up learning about human beings. You learn about history. You learn about your history. Like, I don't know. It's a really, some people may have noticed that I uploaded the video and I had to take it down and re-upload it real quick after I did it the first time.
Yeah.
And it's because I noticed this thing while making this video where I have to look up a bunch of fashions. I had to look up 80s New York fashion, or like I had to look up like disco fashion. I had to look up like, okay, what did the preps dress like in the 50s, right? Because I talked about Grease at one point, and like Grease is set 10 years behind when it was released. It's like a whole thing. Anyway, but like I have to look up like, what are these aesthetics? What are the actual subcultures that generated these aesthetics? What were they interested in? Like, who were they, And this really icky thing occurred. I'm not here to fight about whether AI is like intrinsically evil. However, something that made me feel sick to my stomach is now when you look up 70s New York fashion, you get tons of AI slop, of these smooth fake faces, of this kind of the idea of the aesthetic and the fashion is presented as this kind of detached aesthetic. Like that's just, what it is. So when you look up 70s New York fashion, they don't show you the human beings that define that fashion. They don't bother to show you actual images of humans. They show you the abstracted idea. It's just this aesthetic, as if it's just like, one thing on this lazy Susan of random things that things can look like. And the only thing that matters is like, picking it arbitrarily. Like it doesn't matter where it came from, like who was the originator of that style, or like what that aesthetic might have represented to them.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna free associate off something we were talking about there.
I should close the loop and just say
yeah.
I was conscious of this towards the later end of the process, and one AI image made it into my video, and it made me feel sick. I took it down immediately, put it back up, like because it goes against the spirit of the entire video.
Yeah. I mean, the music thing is interesting too, because to talk about the music thing, the jazz thing, the community thing. You know, in recent years of my life, I've spent, most of my like seeing live music space has been made up of either seeing, jazz and experimental stuff or sort of like Grateful Dead inspired rock improvisation jam band stuff. And the things that I really enjoyed about diving into those worlds, and there's overlap there, and I defend the latter thing more than many, is that it's a different communal experience of seeing that kind of music. And I'll give like a quick example. Like there's a group that I love that plays in LA, but is well known. The Jeff Parker Quartet is a jazz guitar player, very like hip hop influenced, has an improvisational quartet that plays whenever they're all in town in LA. And the last time I saw them was at a music venue that may holds a few hundred. And rather than the stage, they set up in the middle of the room in a circle. Everyone kind of gathers around. They do 2 sets. It's wholly improvised, and it's one of the only musical things I've been to in recent years where like nobody talks, and it almost feels spiritual. And as someone that also has participated in, various forms of religious practice in my life, often in a religious context, people are silent, or people are in awe when there's a sense of the divine or something taking place that transcends the normalcy of our lives.
Yeah,
And I do
into
think
a sacred, like holy ground place where the rules are different. Yeah.
Yeah, and something about being, especially in an improvisational music setting, you sometimes have that sense where people are in awe, they're not talking, and then when it ends, rather than everyone immediately picking up their phone again, you see people turning to each other, just being like, "Holy shit! Like, did that just happen? Did we just see that? Oh my God, were we just in it together?"
Yeah.
And not that it means everyone walks out holding hands and changes their community and starts a revolution, but there's a sense in which that experience of being engaged with artists making a thing leads to the people experiencing that art feeling a level of connectivity they might not feel otherwise, in a way that does remind me of certain religious or spiritual practice. And I think that, like, to even quickly touch on something we've said previously, I mean, that's one of the elements of like religious stuff that can kind of get thrown out the window. The idea that being in community with other human beings that are different than you, combining around whether it's like a theological or an aesthetic experience, is an important part of like being a person and learning to like transcend your own subjectivity and exist with others. And I think that, and I appreciate that you kind of, do this in your work, is like reminding us that whether you are in church or not, or whether you're a Christian or a Buddhist or Muslim or whatever, there's a spiritual importance to aesthetics, and there's a communal importance to aesthetics that we can easily forget about because of the commodification of these things.
Yeah. That's honestly why I kind of am into art. Sometimes I'm really into this Scottish philosopher John McMurray. Just fantastic. He's just fantastic. But one of the things he talks about is like, how do I say this? It's a tremendously beautiful thing to do things for their own sake. Like, when he talks about to grow your kind of emotional life, this is John McMurray's idea. Like, kind of the way to do that is to like feel for the sake of feeling, right? And how to grow like your emotional life and your artistic life is to like see things for the sake of seeing them, right? Instead of using like your senses as a kind of like instrumental tool that allows you to act out your subjective will. It's like, can you stop, like get your conscious goals out of your mind? And like, you're gonna watch this movie, it's like, can you sense it for the sake of sensing it? Like, sense it not to categorize, is this a good movie, do I like this movie, but just, can you just see this thing? Can you just experience it for the sake of experiencing it and be completely open to that experience, like whatever it entails? I'm not particularly good at this. I'm not particularly good at doing that myself. I'm just saying. I'm because that's a true artistic impulse. I think it's a really beautiful thing. It's quite similar to mindfulness. It's a pretty kind of sacred state of mind,
Mhm.
And to be honest, like I'm not that good at that. I'm too thinky, you know. I
Yeah,
get too wrapped up in myself, and I always want to
hard.
construct some grand vision instead of just listen to music for the sake of listening to music completely blankly.
Mhm.
And there's this thing about. I guess what I'm saying is I'm into art, but sometimes I realize, like next to some of my peers, like as a musician, I went to jazz school, and
Mhm.
a lot of my peers, they played guitar and they sang and stuff because they loved doing it, like just for its own sake. For me, just being completely honest, a lot of the reason I'm into art is because of this quality you just described, is because it just like snaps you out of it and makes you all
Mhm.
like suddenly be really conscious and really present together. I kind of am into art for this sacred quality, that art can induce, and everything that goes along with that. It's just, I don't know. I guess I'm just telling you this personal thing about myself. But the thing you described, I'm
Appreciate it.
like, that's why I care about art. And so, you know, anyways, I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah.
End
Well,
sentence.
no, that was great. I wonder then, like, what is your, how will I phrase this? I guess, like, what has been, hmm, okay, how much of the way you think about, I guess, philosophy, the way you think about, and I do, again, I think, uh, and not to kiss your ass too much here, but a thing I do like about your work, and I think is important about it, is it's like, and this is, and again, I'll say this real quick for anyone who's tuned in halfway. We're talking to CJ the X. If you don't know their channel, you should please subscribe. Watch the most recent video. One of the most interesting people on YouTube. Like I said before, they were here. They make me feel uncool and unsmart, and I love them for that. But the thing I enjoy about what you do is it's, in a sense, very non-masturbatory in that you filter ideas through what does it mean in terms of lived experience. And it's not just like I know the concepts, I know the words, everyone love me and kiss me. It's like I know the concepts, I know the words, and here's what we can do with them. I'm wondering what the journey has been for you in balancing or thinking about religion and your like own faith in particular relative to that more philosophical viewpoint. And maybe let me ask this as a prefatory question. This is personal. You don't have to answer it.
No,
Did
I'm
you
interested.
did you grow up Christian and religious?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So then here's what I wonder. Like, what are the things from those early experiences, or what are the ways that you learn to think about the world that you think kind of led you to where you've been growing? Obviously, you're still a young person with lots of fun stuff to do, so you're in process. But what are the sort of like seeds that you can connect to where you are now? And I ask this
All right.
both because I'm curious about you, and I ask this because I'm curious about the way in which, you know, as we've talked about before, people can throw the baby out with the bathwater with
Right.
religion and miss out on some of these things. So I'm curious if you can speak about that.
Um. Well, I definitely think that if I grew up in a kind of standard, just like church upbringing, I wouldn't be into Christianity like at all. um, I would say maybe it's like two pronged. Is it like some childhood formative experiences that um, just revealed I don't know, actual Christian activity in lived experience to be just like rapturous and real,
Hmm.
like in this kind of profound way, like this kind of capital R way, like the real. Um, and that's because, and it's just strange. It's just like my mother, who is cool and featured in my work sometimes, right?
That's also one of the takeaways. Some people were commenting before you got here about your recent video, and there was like 3 different comments that were like, "Their mom seems so cool."
She is cool.
Oh,
It's true.
yeah,
It's true. And she's a big part of, she raised me alone for the
yeah,
most part. And she's a big part of like who I am. A lot of what I espouse, like to her, she's just like, yeah, that's what life's about. And I'm like, yeah, well, you
yeah.
put this beating heart in my chest. And that's why, sometimes I just feel like I'm just kind of giving things my mom taught me to the world because, she's not a YouTuber. But,
Amazing.
one of them is like, and this was early on, it's just the way she raised me within Christianity, where I remember we were driving home from church one morning. I'm like 7 or something. And she turns around, she's like, would you two still be Christian if heaven wasn't real?
Oh,
And I was upset, like, because I was 7. And I was like, what? But she's like, well, would it be worth it? Or are you just doing this so you get to get the ice
Wow.
cream at the end or whatever? Or it's like, do you
Wow.
get anything out of this for real, you know? And it's like repeated experiences like that with my mother, and eventually going into kind of missionary work. We ran like a halfway house on a farm where we just like lived with people getting off the streets or getting off of drugs and
Wow.
stuff. Like we just got really, at some point, like something clicked for my mom. I think I was like 8 years old, where she was having a spiritual experience where she was like, we got to do with this. Like, she's like, I feel like I'm reading the gospel and it's really clear about what to do. Like, you got to give all your stuff away and live in community with people and actually give your life over to communal living and serving people, to really walking with the spirit and trusting the spirit, not just kind of accumulating and living a regular ass middle class life. And she was kind of just like sat us down and was like, is it cool if we do this? And then we embarked on this like intense kind of missionary journey. Again, and not missionary in the kind of, they just shipped us overseas and I did like 3 month tourism thing and like, although we did kind of do that, but we had a really good team for it. And we just really lived it pretty radically. But one of the interesting things about that is the churches kind of don't like it when you do that.
Yeah.
Church, the actual institutions, like it was so strange because we'd be doing this work that's pretty radical, pretty real, and really reaches people, you know? And the churches around us would get salty, actually. They kind of didn't like it. They felt a little upstaged, I think. They felt like there was like kind of a status thing where they kind of were like, well, hey now. Like, they didn't want to support us, which was so strange.
But it's so
and
weird
so,
because you're actually doing the thing, because the stuff that you were describing that you and your mother and your community was doing is stuff that is someone with at least a decent understanding of the New Testament is like the stuff that it says to do.
well, it takes you pretty far away pretty quickly. Like if you look at how Jesus was, it
Yeah.
takes you like, in fact, his entire thing was actually challenging like kind of social norms for the sake of social norms, like challenging the idea that God is, you live like in God and with God by just following the rules. And his whole thing was like, they didn't like him because he wasn't following the rules. He was like, it's more complicated than that. You have to be in the spirit, not just following mortal laws. The mortal laws are like that. The laws that we've derived are designed to lead you towards God. But if God moves away from the law, then you follow God, not the law. Like that's the whole thing where it's like where he's, whatever, shucking corn on the Sabbath or whatever, and people are like, hey, you're not supposed to do that. And I'm like, and he's just like, they're hungry.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
like, and him going to like, drink booze with prostitutes, all the people you're not supposed to. And he was like, the kingdom of heaven is for them. What are you talking about? Like, it's this whole challenging thing. So like, I don't know. So when you start to really deal with actually trying to know people and try to have real relationships and trying to be really honest and build real community and love people and accept people, really quickly you realize Christianity is not about trying not to say fuck. That's
Yeah.
ridiculous.
Yeah.
Anyways, that was a lot, but
No, that's interesting. And I'm just going to say shout out to, just because they said something in the chat, to Maggie May Fish. I don't know if you're still here. One of my favorite YouTubers.
oh, what's up, Maggie?
So,
I met
so
Maggie
thanks
in
for hanging out.
LA.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah.
Thanks for popping in, Maggie. It's awesome. We love your videos. I mean, what you said about fuck makes me think of when I was in college. Like, so I kind of went on this journey of I grew up in a very, not traditional in a super strict way, but like in a very Irish Catholic-y family where like you are Catholic because you are born of this family and we all do this stuff. And it was a generally like liberal vibe in the family. This was like before American Catholicism took this aggressively hard right turn. But then for me, it was like I flirted with, I didn't just flirt with, I went to like third base with evangelicalism in my high school and college years, precisely because there was like less of the liturgical theological thing and more of the like, we do stuff. And I got involved in some communities. Yeah.
We
And
eat together. Yeah, that's Christianity, We
yeah.
live together and we eat together.
Yeah, and they were just like doing stuff like, oh, we're gonna go hang out at this shelter with people that are going through a shitty time, or we're gonna go. One group I was a part of went and protested a KKK rally, and I was like, that
Yeah.
rips. I wanna not like the KKK. And I remember there was a guy who people liked when I was in college, Tony Campolo, I think his name was. He was like an early kind of like popular pastor who was like a social justice guy, and he had a thing he would do when he would talk at conferences, and he would be like, while I'm talking right now, like 15,000 kids in the next 5 minutes are going to die in the world because of starvation, and you don't give a fuck. And then he would pause and be like, and right now,
this.
yeah, many of you
I
are
like
more
this a lot too.
offended that I said fuck than you are that 15,000 kids are dying.
Uh-huh.
And I think about that like a lot in terms of the way in which not just Christianity, but our politics and our social virtues can be about what is said, not what is happening, or like what our values signify, what they look like. And I think that, there's like that whole element. And again, like this is just to say, I agree with you, and I struggle with this sometimes of how to like articulate that, like, yes, a lot of the bad men in the world are using this religious system to justify stuff. And we have a video coming out Friday that I watched a lot of this like really far right evangelical millennialist theology stuff where they're trying to like make Jesus come here quicker, and they think that like women shouldn't get to vote because their husband should vote for them. And this one pastor in Idaho made a video about how to raise strong men, and there's a clip in it that I just watched over and over as my soul died, where the guy says, we want to raise young men so that if they're in a school shooting environment, they don't run away from the bullets, they run towards them. And I was like, Jesus Christ, your take on Christianity is that kids should get murdered at school.
I just don't understand. It's just, I don't even.
It's hard if like you see that for some people, just to be like, okay, that stuff is all the bad stuff. So now we got to do this other thing. But it's hard sometimes to articulate or even like defend those traditions when the people that most publicly embody those traditions are out of pocket.
It's blasphemous. I mean, it's insanity to me. I think it's probably the first step in kind of figuring some of this stuff out is to remember who's the person that coined the banality of evil.
Was it Arendt?
Yeah, Arendt, Hannah Arendt.
Yeah.
So I was reading, one of her papers is on authority. It was just this whole thing, right? But just pointing out quite accurately that a lot of the moralities and like philosophies that we ascribe to Christianity actually come from the Roman Empire, because this major thing happened where the Roman emperor claimed Christianity and kind of mushed like the Roman Empire's things with Christian imagery, and I know at least, a few pastors that I speak to that are like, worst thing to ever happen to Christianity. Because if you read like and I think probably the cleanest picture of like what Christianity is if you read the Gospels, look at what Jesus did, and also if you read Acts, which is what the church actually was. That's the church, and that looks like. No one ever wants to talk about
Acts, by the way. No one ever wants to talk about the book where they just.
They want to talk about it because it's just straight socialism, socialism, and no one wants to talk about it. But I'm like, that's the model for the church, motherfuckers. Just watch yourself. But the thing that really disturbs me so greatly is like when you look at the Gospels and you look at Acts, like I don't know, just like three things out the gate. Like just like the first one is that Jesus disappointed his disciples because he did not go to war. He didn't run towards the bullets. He picked a kind of like cultural, spiritual revolution that embraced people that you're not supposed to embrace. It was peace. It was defiantly peaceful. It was communal and loving and transformational and nonviolent, and so that's the first thing. So the whole version is like, so instead of overthrowing your enemy, you kind of sacrifice yourself and die out of pure like loving, like you know what I mean? Instead of enacting like your selfish will, you actually become part of a communal spirit, right? So that's the first fucking thing, right? The second thing is no one knows the date nor time when Jesus returns. So every apocalypse cult that's trying to like spur that on, you're in the wrong religion. I don't even know what you're talking about. And then, oh my God, and then what was the other thing you just said? I don't understand. When that rapture comes that you're talking about, like theologically, you're going to be surprised who's on what side. That's the whole goddamn thing, right? So to me, it's like, to be Christian, the very first step is being like, I don't know that I'm on the right side. I don't know that everyone that I think is, the wrong kind of Christian is wrong. You know what I mean? So like, as soon as you start playing the game of like, oh, you're not acting Christian enough, I don't know. It's just so anti the built-in humanity, humility and humanity of what Christ modeled. Sorry, we don't have to talk about this forever, but it just pisses me off.
I'm interested in it, and I think
when you tell someone you're going to hell, when you're Jordan Peterson, you start describing people as like Luciferian. I'm like, you already failed. Like, you're not even Christian anymore. As soon as you start to play that game, it's preposterous.
Well, God, I remember And
I
I
understand. I
can't
kind of
believe,
just did it myself, and so I'm
yeah.
just
Oh boy.
acknowledging. Yeah.
No, I can't believe this is one of the things that got me there, though. But I do remember as well. One of the first evangelical youth pastors I interacted with. His name was Craig, and then he soon married this 18-year-old that he was pastoring when she was not 18, and then she was 18 and graduated
Oh.
high school, and they magically fell in love. Really beautiful stuff. But I went to like a youth group once or twice with a friend, and he was like, "Hey, Michael, can I chat with you for a second?" And I was like, "Sure." Adult figure who seems cool, yeah. And he was like, "Tonight you're gonna be getting a ride home in the car or whatever." And he literally did "You got in a car accident tonight and you died. Like, do you know where you're going?" Which, first of all, an insane thing. And again, it frames
Just
the entire
insane.
thing off of what you do when
Do
you
you get
die.
infinite reward or infinite punishment, which is just
Yeah.
yeah.
And then I went home and jacked off and cried. Uh, but no, when you bring up the Peterson thing, because this is something I go through stages where like I get obsessed with the Jordan Peterson thing, and then I'm always like, you know what, that's it. And I'll like make a video, and I'll get here and I'll look at our fine audience and be like, okay, that's it for me and Peterson. I can't do it anymore. But I always get sucked back in. And the most recent time I got sucked back in was the obsession about like Lucifer and Satanism and him and some of the folks around him.
Yeah.
Um, both being obsessed with like how Marx and postmodern philosophers are all Satanist,
Yeah.
and they're obsessed with how Kamala Harris is Satanist. And they just use Satanists in this way that means almost nothing. And I feel like, again, is not reflective of what you see like in the tradition. Anyways, and like I like studied theology for a while. Like this just isn't a thing that people that take this stuff seriously are concerned with. But I wonder if you have thoughts. I have some thoughts on this. With like, what do you think JP's doing with his, because he's had both like the Christian turn, but then really particularly this like obsession with the satanic within his Christian turn.
I think that Jordan Peterson, people sometimes like to say that he changed at some point. They like to say, "Oh, post coma, like he came out and he's different, he's more combative now," or like they keep. To me, the change happened in 2016, and it's actually seated in his work from before then. From like what is it, 99 is when Maps of Meaning came out, right? And something that's built into that, the thing that his whole philosophy is hinged on actually, is this like real like good and evil, and this real kind of attraction and obsession with evil, and this kind of fixation on the idea that all of reality, every moment, every small decision, whether you clean your room or not, is a war between heaven and hell. And if we don't play our cards right, we're going to be in hell, it's really always been a thing, where it comes down to like, and not only, and how he grounds that again is not like, oh, bad things might just happen if we don't pay attention. It's that like, if bad things happen, it means we chose it. And we chose it by lying to each other and lying to ourselves. So literally, and I'm being sincere here, right? According to his philosophy, when you don't clean your room, right, you're lying to yourself and ticking like the doomsday clock closer towards hell. You're being satanic when you don't assume responsibility and just all these kind of things that he decided are what Christ means, Christ is, in his perception of the world, right? And so like the thing is like, so in 2016 when he started blowing up, he just saw like, I think he got what he wanted. Basically, he got some epic, exciting warfare thing between good and evil, and at some point he decided, and the thing that he like, the people that hate him so much, they're lying. They're lying to him. They're lying to themselves. And it's just this thing that's already built into his philosophy that's only increased over time. And it doesn't surprise me. So when people go like, oh, I love Jordan Peterson in 2016 and 17, but now in Daily Wire, he's too partisan. I'm like, bullshit. Bullshit. He was always that way. It was always that way. And he's always been attracted to this. And, when it works for you, like when, framing the world like that gets you an insane amount of like riches and, insulation against your critics, when it gives you so much, when being at war with culture instead of being a peacemaker gives you so much, I don't know, why would he ever let go? I just see it as he got what he wanted, and it's what he's always wanted. So I feel that's
no, and I'm glad that you acknowledge that there's like that consistency, because sometimes when I think about, because I've had, I would say like some of the most good faith conversations I've had via like this show on the channel with people that vehemently disagree with me are some people that will be like, hey, I get what you're saying about Peterson now, but actually he used to, think X, Y, or Z. But I do think there's a sense in which like if you read and watch where he's been, it's almost like he always has said as much as he could get away with in a certain context. And I feel like
Mm.
as an academic, he did the game of like doing what you're describing, and even like to touch on your video again, like in the both aesthetic and the pedagogical guise of academia, he was like, this is what I can say as this person in this space. And as he's transitioned out of that, and of course there was a point where his academic career ended because he could no longer stay within the framework of that. But the core of it's always been there. But it is like, I mean, it's been wild too now to see. I mean, I almost couldn't believe it when I first saw the clip of him and Russell Brand doing the Lord's Prayer
Praying in public,
together.
praying in public, praying in public. Celebrities at a partisan political event praying in public. The name of Jesus.
Do not your good works in the temple in front of others. Let your left hand not know what your right
Have they
hand
read
is
the goddamn
doing.
Bible? I don't understand. Like, have they read the Gospels? I don't know.
Well, I
Sometimes I
think
don't fucking know, Michael.
Russell Brand found a new gospel because now he's selling his Christian amulet that protects you from Wi-Fi and 5G.
What?
Oh, this is a real thing. This is a real thing, by the way.
Oh, he's selling crystals and he's saying
Yeah,
they're
he has
Christ
an
crystals?
he has an amulet now, and it's like he somehow connected it to his Christianity. I saw someone in the chat. If you know the full details, let me know. But yeah, he's selling this amulet, and it protects you and your spirit from like Wi-Fi and 5G. And it's a lot. But again, like I think it's interesting that like Russell Brand, like why is it just when people make this like Christian turn, it's always, I just hate how cynical it feels, and I hate how we have to ask like, why are they doing this? And often it's like, oh, how many sexual assault claims have been made against them? Like, great time to get redeemed in the blood of the Lamb, Russell. Yeah.
Gosh.
But I think someone where is this? I saw
To me, it's just dangerous. It's like, because this is another thing I thought about Peterson in his work, right? Is like, I don't know. Everyone does have, I say these things. I still have my private kind of religious life. You know what I mean? I think I have seen some things, and the way that this is my personal framework, my philosophical framework. I've seen some things where it's like, well, first of all, I think of like, sin is like it's like a disease. It's like bad for your soul. You know what I mean? It's like you get possessed by an ugliness and like a desire to create more ugliness. I don't think it's just exclusively. I don't deal too well with the problem of evil. I'm not going to try to solve it or anything, right? But I think there's just so many examples of like, people just because they're human, right? Like ending up in like. Situations where they are not, I don't know, like bad patterns, like ugly patterns, like that harm them and harm others. I think that happens all the time, and healing that comes through relationship and love, and understanding, community, which again to me are just all Christian principles.
No, I mean, this is why I often like, and I think I'm probably less theologically or practically engaged with Christianity than you are at this point, but I know that, there's a reason I've been attracted to so many thinkers that are grounded in that tradition. There's a reason I spent most of my primary research years getting obsessed with Soren Kierkegaard and writing about him, because I do think there's a way that like what someone like Kierkegaard describes when he talks about sin and when he talks about faith, it's something that like it works if you are a good, Danish Lutheran in the 19th century, but it also works if you're like, I don't know, a weird polypantheist in San Francisco in 2024, in so much as it describes a way of existence and a way of existing authentically and a way of understanding that we do have these cracks and fractures at the heart of like our own subjectivity and what it means to be, and that faith is a way of accepting the sort of unknowability of what's out in front of us. And even looking at, and this is a thing that I think about a lot, I think about these days, when and have you ever read any Kierkegaard?
I actually haven't, but
it's one of those things where like I think if you found the right stuff, you'd like it, but it's a hard thing to get into.
It's quite a tome. I haven't dug. I try to also like limit myself because I get nervous about whether or not I'm saying accurate things about people. I don't want to just be like a smorgasbord of like saying invoking a bunch of philosophers' names that I don't really know, and also that I don't know the story of. Going back to that thing, I like knowing the human story of the philosopher, the context out of which the ideas came. So it's like until I have the time, desire to like sit with the existentialists like a little longer, and I'm like, you know what I mean? It's probably better just to admit I'm a pragmatist.
No, it's a good attitude. There's one Kierkegaard idea I'll tell you about if that's okay.
Yeah, sure.
He makes this distinction at one point between what he calls the church triumphant and the church militant. And the church triumphant for him is he's like, this is a version of Christianity in the church that believes it has access to objective truth. It thinks it's like completed its historical project. And
Right.
now like what it should do is just like tell everyone what to think and how to think it and
Yeah, we
dominate
figured it out.
overall.
That's it.
Yeah. It's sort of like, the pinnacle of European Christendom and this weird sort of synthesis of like church and state, even though he doesn't use that language. And then he has this idea of the church militant. And what the church militant for him is like a version of faith that recognizes that it's always grounded in your subjectivity. You never know the full thing for sure, and that you need to be working that thing out via your acts and your practices. Like he writes about
Yeah.
this in a book called Practice in Christianity. And for him, he basically will get at this idea that like faith and love are like things you do. They're not just things you believe. And when he does this, he's almost talking about Christianity and sort of like idealist philosophy at the same time, because his
Mm,
problem with, not even with Hegel, but like post-Hegelian
right.
idealism is like this idea that people just, oh, I understand the world now, so I'm good. I
Yeah.
understand the conceptual structures of things, and he thinks that takes you away from the intensity of existence. It takes you away from
Yep.
literature and art and
It
love
takes
and
away from
passion and all the things.
relationships. It takes away
Yeah,
from relationships, from growth, like
yeah.
and yeah, no, and that's the important thing also about that, right? Is that like even if and I'm also sensitive to the fact that we've been talking about Jesus for like an hour, and I don't know if that's what people signed up for. I'm not trying to
They probably
but and
didn't, but hey, you know what? You
but
know
this
what?
is
You
where
don't always,
I'm
yeah.
That's true. You don't always know. Yeah, not up to you what you get necessarily. But this is also where I'll like also ground it. Is like to me, that's all like important lessons of Christianity, like the lessons. And another major lesson, again, if you look at like the dude that was named Christ, that's supposed to embody it, right? The other important bit is it doesn't matter actually if you call it Jesus. If it's true, if it's beautiful, then it is that thing. And there's this like radical humility to not need it to go by the exact words that you say. This radical humility to be like, I'm not going to know how it looks. I'm not going to know who ends up like wheat and who ends up chaff. Like, and so in order to really, embody this, I need to be really present and have real relationships and be really authentic and exist in community and be humble and keep myself revising. Definitely not think that I figured it out and now I have to tell everyone exactly what it is.
Yeah. Well, and I think understanding this is important as well, because we were being bad kids on here and sort of hate watching a Charlie Kirk thing a few weeks ago.
Nice.
And when she was
Sounds like
connecting,
something I wouldn't want to do. Yeah.
you should never do it. And it led to a conversation about sort of the contradictions and the fundamental hypocrisy of a certain sort of American pro-lifism. But I think that like even if one, and I'll say this to people who are still hanging out with us and watching, thanks so much for being here. Like the stream, some more of your friends show up. Make sure you subscribe to CJ's channels after this. Please consider signing up for CJ's Patreon, where they put lots of very cool stuff on there and talk to lots of interesting people. But I think even if you're someone who's like, I am fundamentally atheist in a deep ontological way, I have no desire to participate in a religious community, great. But if you're a person who thinks all that and is like, but I want to live in a world that's just and equitable. I believe in the fundamental goodness of humans and art and love, and I want to live in a world that reflects that. I mean, it's important to know this because like and I'll be really reductive here, some of the bad guys think that their faith justifies their position, but it has way more to do with your position, friends.
Yeah,
There's way
exactly.
more
Exactly.
in that
Saying, don't let
tradition.
them tell you what it is. Like that's the sin
Yeah,
that's being committed. Is there's some Christians out there that are declaring what Christianity is, and it just so happens to very conveniently line up with their every desire and personal preference.
yeah.
And what I mean, that's it.
Yeah,
And
yeah. I mean, that's why I got
yeah,
so mad once that I made a sort of reckless, sloppy video about Jordan Peterson and Christianity because I couldn't stop thinking about it. But in which, he would go out of his way, he talked about how if you're really a Christian, you don't care about the bloody environment or the climate. But like you do, because care for creation and care for the earth is at the heart of the
crazy.
tradition. Talked about how like social justice and like all this has nothing to do with it. It's right there, Sermon on the Mount, other places. He goes out of his way to try to say, the poor in spirit is about a spiritual thing, and those who he just goes through all these hoops to try to disconnect it from a sort of, whether it's ecological practice, social practice, and again, like and CJ brought this up earlier, when Christ himself is like having wine with the hookers and stuff like that, sort of like, how dare you then use that faith to justify like being a transphobe or something? It just
It's
doesn't add up.
preposterous. It's preposterous.
And
The
it's
whole
important.
thing is about
Yeah.
opening up your consciousness to the stranger and realizing that like that's where God is. It's like
Yeah. And
embracing
that's why,
people that you don't want to embrace.
yeah. And I would do this evil thing back in the day because I'm an evil person where I would sometimes mix some Marx quotes and some Jesus quotes on a slideshow in a class I was teaching.
That's pretty
And
funny.
yeah, and you could totally, and this is when I was teaching at a Catholic university. Um, but there's so much, and again, the point of synthesis here obviously is like the liberation theology tradition,
Yeah,
where you
of
could
course.
read liberation theology as a Christian who cares about humans and justice. You could read liberation theology as a sort of atheist Marxist, and you're gonna like be like, yeah, fundamentally, yes. Um, but yeah, that's
And
again
that's
to say that if
certainly
you're
where I lean is like in a progressive direction with it all. But again, I think the most important thing basically is to just be wary of declaring that you've got it. I think that
Mhm,
that's a
mhm.
real dangerous game. That's a game of idolatry, a game where you're bordering on blasphemy. It's just a dangerous, strange game to play. And so, like, there's this version of like, Jordan Peterson can have his morality, his whole philosophy, and that's dandy, right? But when he starts educating the masses on this, like, is what Christianity is about. I'm like, hold your fucking horses, right? And all I want to say to my audience, what I try to tell people is like, you know, um, have your own relationship with it. Like, read what if you're
Yeah,
and all Christianity is to me, or the biggest part of it is like read about Jesus's life, and then think about just this dude. Just think about
yeah.
what he said and what he did, and draw your own conclusions. Don't let mortals necessarily tell you exactly what to feel about this or what it actually means,
And
especially
I
if
would
they're
say,
100% sure, and
yeah.
especially if they're not good at, peacemaking and relationships and,
Well, yeah. And in the vein of giving unasked for advice to strangers on the internet, I mean, I think too, the other thing we can learn from some of, again, the bad men out there are like, and to maybe even reference the Kierkegaard thing of like the church triumphant, you know, it's important to not make the same mistake. Because if the mistake made on one side is the idea that we have objective access to the complete truth, we
yeah,
do not have to question it, we don't have to be anxious about it, we don't have to acknowledge that there's things we don't know. If you take that same logic to your even like good or right beliefs, you're still going to fall down a similar rabbit hole that's going to be more about being the boy with the best ideas and not
yeah,
someone who's sort of subjectively engaged in a journey towards something with the acknowledgement that like you're definitely and like I am wrong about stuff. I have changed my mind
yeah.
about stuff. And when you read books and when you watch movies and when you see music, like operating with that attitude of like you're open to new stuff, you could be wrong, and if you are, that's okay. It's going to help you.
Yeah, and
Um,
that's one of the reasons I'm so attracted to pragmatism is to understand, to redefine like what when your beliefs are true, when you believe them, and which is you believe them because you believe they're true. That understanding is like, okay, this has been a valuable belief. Instead of
mhm.
being like, oh, I ontologically correspondence theory style figured out the truth and that's why I believe it. I believe it because it's true. It's like I believe it because this is valuable to believe. This is the best thing I have to believe right now, and I'm willing for this to be revised. But
Yeah.
also I'm not needing to denigrate like all of the things that I believe and all the truths that I've amassed as all just being like, I don't know, it's like basically not real or it's arbitrary or you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well,
Like
I've a
you could
hard, yeah. I'm gonna throw a hard pivot at you because I want to respect your time. There's also something I want to talk to you about,
yeah,
if that's
please
okay.
let's yeah, and I'm yeah, sorry.
Okay. But also at any point, tap out. Feel free. I don't want to take
No,
advantage of
it's
your time.
totally
So
dandy. I just also want to like acknowledge like for anyone that is not like Christian listening to this, like I'm sorry, I'm just talking about my personal like faith, my personal passion on this
yeah,
area, and I just always try to be authentic about that online, and it seems to resonate for some people, but I'm not trying to just like convert a bunch of people. I don't think that's necessary. All I really care about is people having relationships and values and communities and having a beautiful life, and you know what I mean,
yeah.
feeling
As
part
long
of
as
something.
long as you don't, pause, mute me, and lead this in a prayer to salvation with everyone else, we're good. Um, uh,
Oh my
with
God.
every knee bent and every eye closed.
By the way, now, if you go to the highest tier on my Patreon, I will mail you a sacred amulet that will imbue you with um,
That's way better than
the
Russell
true,
Brand.
the true Jesus, the spirit of Jesus
Yeah,
Christ. I put it in some amulets.
yeah.
Actually, and if you
Um,
and there's actually and also one lucky patron is actually going to get a golden calf that I put the spirit of Jesus in. I'm going to give you
that's
that.
so sick.
Yeah,
Yeah, we're doing
so
a
you
thing
can
where at
see
the
it.
highest level, you get to crucify me next to a criminal. No one do that, please. But speaking of, Patreon and YouTube being methods of metaphorical crucifixion, do you think that like making YouTube videos generally and in the way that you do it, do you think of it as art?
So I don't know. It just depends what you mean by art. Like, obviously,
Yeah,
on one hand, you can just be like, of course, I'm creating these
yeah.
objects. They are aesthetic objects. What I often say for myself, though, is that like my YouTube videos contain art, as in like again, because I think of art in this kind of very sacred, like kind of like religious thing for me. You know what I mean? So when I think of like, oh, what are my art mediums? I think that my videos contain like the craft of philosophy. I think they
Mhm.
contain a lot of
Yeah.
comedy. They're writing, Sometimes
Mhm.
they dance into kind of film territory. They involve music. Sometimes music I created, like this latest one is like a song that I produced in it.
Mhm.
And so like I like to say it contains my art just because I don't know exactly how much reverence I get out of the medium of video essays. You know
Mhm.
what I mean? And like if that has solidified, if that is something. But I would
Yeah.
say that, to something you mentioned earlier, like tying your own subjectivity into the YouTube video, like talking a bit anecdotally in between like these kind of philosophical ideas and talking about art and like other pieces of media and stuff.
Mhm.
I know part of what makes an art medium is what is it good at? You know what I mean?
Mhm.
That's the thing that like is just like it's kind of like a John Dewey artist experience thing, which is that like what how we understand the meaning of painting, like as a medium, is like what do paintings uniquely do? What do as opposed to like a movie. You know what I mean? And so what I think YouTube videos kind of uniquely do is allow you to kind of present research while interweaving it with the anecdote, right? Like that's just
Mhm.
something unique about it. And I realize
That's
even
really
if it
well
makes
put.
me uncomfortable, it really is the medium. So how do I think about YouTube videos? I think they're YouTube videos. I try to make them good YouTube videos, but
Yeah. Well, because I
uh,
think sometimes too, in some of your, you're sort of rebellious sometimes in the way that you will publicly comment and talk about, how you think about YouTube videos and how you make them, right? Because there's a whole genre like of YouTube video about the making of the YouTube video. And there's
oh sure, yeah,
a sort of like obsessiveness with the structure of the thing and analytics. I know you've written about like fuck analytics and things of that nature. Because also too, I will say, CJ does something that's different. Not just makes YouTube videos, but writes words on their website. So friends, check that out as well. You have essays on there, and they're fun. Um, but yeah, I just wonder. I feel very like contradictory, conflictual, all that about YouTube these days because it's just
yeah,
like there's so many people making great stuff and seeming to use it as a creative space. At the same time, there's this pressure and tension and obsession with growth and with analytics and all that. And I do think at a certain point, like one worries. I guess it's like it's worrying about like the line because I think sometimes if you're saying something important or that you think is important, well, first off, you make a fucking video that you put into the world, you should think it's important because you should respect people enough to
yeah,
not want to waste their time. And then
yeah,
if you were saying something that you think is important, I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with, to an extent, trying to like get people to see the thing, right? If you're putting
right,
on a show, you make a cool flyer for your show or you figure out how to promote it because you're like, I made music that I think is good because I think it's good. I want people to see it. Um, but then, of course, the other side of that line would be if you're making music and you think, how can I make the music that I think people want to hear so that they will come see it? And then, of course, the art of the creativity is like sacrificed for the thing.
yeah.
And I don't know. This isn't even a question. This is me just out loud saying that is
It's
a tension I
strange.
feel and that I see in YouTube as a medium as it grows and continues to grow. And I try to like when I watch stuff too, sometimes I even have that thought of like how much of this is someone doing a thing they think is good and occasionally using some tricks to make sure people are watching. Because we know that we're all like brain poisoned. We
Yeah,
know
yeah,
that like the best people who we love are going to watch videos with their phone in one hand and their TV in front of them and their foot on an iPad while
yeah.
using a flashlight and making a fucking macchiato. So it's just that thing of like, is it giving in to that sort of, uh, you know, I don't know. I guess this is even a question, CJ. I'm just
No,
ranting a bit
totally.
about the existential struggles of figuring out how to make stuff that's good that people care about, and how much we sort of give into the way in which things like YouTube have poisoned our brains and our sort of
Yeah.
collective imagination and attention span.
Yeah. And I'm just kind of self-reflecting on the fly. I mean, honestly, people often comment on this thing that sometimes that they'll see me go like, I don't know if my YouTube videos are my art or whatever, or like my kind of my apparent sometimes like resentment or friction with the platform and the medium that has given me my career, given me my life that I live in now,
Yeah.
and so and I don't, and so in reflecting on it now, I mean, like, here's the thing, like, what makes a good YouTube video? Like, what is a YouTube video? And I think this is one of the things that I talk about in one of my lectures, right? Is like, is a YouTube video a kind of coherent art medium? And the bottom line is just like, no, like, not at all.
Yeah.
There's too many genres of YouTube video. YouTube is just a delivery mechanism for video,
Yeah, it's a platform.
So how do you be a good YouTuber? I mean, does it mean just aligning with the ambitions and desires of the like lords of the platform? Is it just getting a high view count? Is it like getting that 1 out of 10 metric, the preposterous metric? Is that it? Is that what making a good YouTube video is? And I'm like, if that's the case, I don't want to be a good YouTuber, and so I think that's maybe are my videos my art? I don't know. I'm not sure how I feel about the video essay medium.
Yeah.
I'm happy with the compromise that I reach with it. And then also I have to be incredibly grateful because like this is, again, I would never have chosen to be a YouTuber. I just did it kind of on impulse while very broke and while no other options, kind of like nothing else was panning out. And then it's what worked. And there's another religious experience, right? It's like outside of what I would have preferred to be known for in one formation of myself. I discovered, oh, here's where I'm most valuable, here where maybe I wouldn't have chosen to go, like outside of my most self-serving definition of myself. I discover that I can give the best of me to people, bits of me
And
that
that's
maybe I
like a
didn't even want to
common
consider the best of me.
experience. Yeah, I feel like a lot of the best people are people I enjoy most that make things on this platform are people that like didn't set out to be this. They set out primarily, whether it's to be a philosopher, writer, an actor, a comedian, a filmmaker,
Because
whatever.
there's a real clear reason for that. It's because if you set out to be a YouTuber, then like, what is that? That's just you aligning with like strict capitalist interests, like a rule set that's handed down to you by the lords of the cloud. And I don't really respect that as like, that's not an art medium to me. That's not a craft, which is
Yeah.
why I kind of slink around this question sometimes. It's like, I'm so
But then,
grateful.
yeah. But I guess I
And
wonder then with the question of like art and creativity relative to, I guess not the medium of the platform of YouTube, because I do think there's a thing I see sometimes where I feel people are sort of like, "Aw shucks, it's just a YouTube video. It's just this one thing." And then I'm like, is that being realist? Is that being false humble? Or in a way, is that kneecapping the potential for this to be more? Because it's embarrassing for many people to be like, I'm going for it. It's embarrassing for a lot
yeah,
of people to be like, I'm trying to make art. I'm trying to make something different. I'm trying to push an audience or whatever. So fucking embarrassing. I'm Midwestern in my bones and stuff like that makes me want to just run into a room and hide. But then I guess I worry is like, does the detachment or the sort of like it's just this sort of thing keep people from going for it a little bit more? And would the platform be more interesting if more people felt like they could kind of go for it?
yeah, I'm just not sure. The
Yeah.
only thing that I will
I
say
don't
is
know. Yeah.
like, the only thing that I will say is I think of, like, again, as a pragmatist, things are not measured by like, um, like slotting neatly, firmly into an objective static category. I
Mhm.
think like I just make definitions based on tendency, right?
Mhm.
So, something that I sometimes like when you make a song about singing songs, I'm just saying that's going to tend to not cause many rapturous experiences. That's going to tend to, you know, that seems apparent to me, And similarly, like me and my sibling Ben are always like we laugh about like whenever like there's a movie that's like that someone writes like a script about like being a script writer, and it's like
Mhm.
I'm just telling you like like a lot of like beloved movies are not about that. Like, it just seems like that when you start to engage in that endeavor, like the tendency is that, it's not going to be like one of those great rapturous experiences that we tend to value, so deeply. And so what I mean about YouTube videos is that I think they tend to not be art. And I think that like, they tend to, like, even when you go like real ambitious with a YouTube video, and I welcome people to do it. Obviously, I try to level up my game. There's a lot of wonderful like videos hosted on this platform, obviously, right? But I don't know, like you always kind of slink back to like talking to a camera in like a relatable,
Yeah.
anecdote fashion, and like
Yeah.
like it's just that's fine. Like it's totally fine. You know what I mean?
Well,
I don't know.
and this thing like happens in cycles, but yeah, recently I feel like in the past few months there's been another wave of like video essays about the video essay.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and stuff, which is sometimes I find interesting. Sometimes I'm like, what are we doing here? Yeah. Well, here, let me say this then, and we'll let you slink off into the glorious
I'm
Canadian
having fun.
sunshine.
I
Okay,
wanna
good,
keep,
good.
yeah.
Well,
Can I stick around? Can we take?
you stick around as long as you want. You leave when you leave. I'll never stop. I'll sit here, pee in my pants if that's how long it takes. What do you know what you're working on next, YouTube wise? Like, how long out do you think of? Because you do a thing which I love and I'm so envious of. Is it seems like you kind of upload a video when you have a video to upload.
Yeah.
Like you are not one of these people who has some religious cadence at which you're putting stuff up. Sometimes it seems like you'll put a few things out closer together. Sometimes you'll take some big breaks, and obviously you're doing other stuff in real life. You're doing things on your Patreon, but when you just put a video out, like the one you put out today, is your vibe a little bit like let's chill for a bit, or are there already things percolating? Do you have stuff? I know that you might have some long-term stuff you're still working on, but curious what your move is now.
I'm always inspired by this interview with Soundwave, like the producer, like that
Yeah.
produces like the
Is
producer
Soundwave
of
the one
Kendrick.
that yeah.
Yeah,
Okay,
all
cool.
over
Go
To
ahead.
Pimp a
Yeah.
Butterfly and like
Yeah,
everything, right? Like just all of. And I remember there was an interview with them one time where they asked him, it's like, how'd you celebrate after To Pimp a Butterfly dropped? Like, how'd you celebrate? And he was like we went to the studio. It's like, what do you mean? Like, that's not, we just make music. Like, it's not like, oh, we're like aching, it's to eke out like these achievements and we suffer. And then we get to the point that's like, I finished music. I can stop making music now. It's like, no, our daily experience is making music. Like, it's this thing that, C.T. Nguyen, philosopher, talks about with like, he mentions about like his friends who rock climb, like this particular quality of games. Sorry, I'm kind of all over the place, but so in his game philosophy writing, he often cites Bernard Suits' The Grasshopper. And the argument at the end of that book is like, if we lived in heaven, in utopia, where like all material concerns are solved, we live forever, everything's great, there's no problems anymore, what would we do? And he's like, we either die of boredom or play games, which suggests there's something about games that is the meaning of life. It's something like paradisal about games, right? And it's like, it's this intrinsic good, And so, when he talks about rock climbing, it's like you ask your rock climbing friends that are really into it, and you're like, so what are you gonna do when you retire from rock climbing? Like after you accomplish like big goal and you're in retirement, like what are you gonna do when you quit? And they're like, what? This is what I do. Like, what are you talking about? Anyways, that's a long way to say that. No, I was writing a script today. Like, it's like I feel better after I release something. I'm like, just get right back to it, because that's where I want to be, is doing it for the joy of doing it, not trying to ratify by my behavior that this is like some cross to bear that I have to suffer and grit my teeth through. I want to find joy in it. So I always take like completing something as reason to keep going.
Yeah. Do you feel like teasing it all stuff you might work on in the future, or do you want to keep that secret?
Nah.
I respect that.
It.
I do.
Yeah.
What is it like because you do in-person events sometimes?
Yeah.
What's that like? Because not a lot of, some people that do YouTube things and internet things do human things, but a lot don't. So I wonder like how the work you do translates, or what that looks like when you do an in-person event.
Well, again, my kind of passion for art mediums is such that when I do a medium, I want to do like that medium. You know what I mean? So that's why I started writing essays, because I'm like, sometimes I just want to write an essay that's a little more like technical or persuasive. And I do think that's different than making a YouTube video. And when I make a YouTube video, I want to make a good YouTube video that people watch and like has all the qualities that YouTube uniquely can offer. And so I just like exploring things like that. So I do So when I'm gonna do a music live show, it's just gonna be my music. You know, I'm not mixing shit in. And so I just felt compelled, felt right to try to do like live lecturing, basically. It's kind of like an emerging format, actually. I don't know. Have you ever heard of like
Yeah.
PowerPoint parties? I've been to a few of these where like all your friends make a PowerPoint presentation about a subject and then you give it to each other. And then Dropout.tv has a show where that's basically what they do.
Yeah. So I think, and I wonder, I think this is where maybe the dropout thing might have come from, or at least the germinal form of it. Because there used to be this show at the UCB theater in LA, or a
Yeah.
show that
Yep.
I did it a couple times. Well, there's one show, it's called like TED XXX, and it was
What's
TED
this?
Talks
What's this
about like
collective called? Is
sex.
this like the thing Amy Poehler's been in? Like that's
Yeah,
this
yeah,
is
yeah,
what
yeah,
you're
yeah.
talking about?
Yeah,
Yeah.
UCB. It kind of sucks now though, but yeah. So I've done that in like more of a comedic way before. I did like a PowerPoint show about how my mom taught me about oral sex when I was 12 years old, and
Oh
told me
man,
that it's really important to please a woman. It was this wild talk. I
it's
shouldn't tell
true.
this story, guys, but
It's
yeah,
true though.
it was actually informative, but it was a thing that she like should not have told me in the way she told me at the time she told me. Um, but and yeah, and actually, when I used to be an academic, I had a friend that did this thing where once a year he had a party, and you would get a secret invitation and like a location, and everyone had to give a presentation on something. All that to say is, I've heard about the PowerPoint thing. So when you do your live thing, are you sort of mixing a
Yeah.
lecture with a PowerPoint to have like that sort of? Because I think in a way too, I feel like when you do that, there's a way in which some of those do look like, and I don't mean this in a demeaning way at all, like a good live version of a video essay where you're doing
Exactly.
some of
Well,
that stuff.
that's what the goal is to try to figure out, like, try to hone this craft a little more. And what it is like, it's strange, but it's like a pseudo educator. It's like me trying to investigate, like, if the YouTuber or video essayist doesn't feel like a craft to me, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
Then I'm like, how do I sharpen in on what this is? Like, what value am I providing people?
Mhm.
How do I take this seriously and get good at it? Like, and so I can proudly identify as something that's more than YouTuber, because that's just such a giant vague word. Like,
Yeah.
what is my craft? What am I getting good at? And it is this kind of comedic pseudo educator thing, right? It's this, that's what it is, right? So the live show is me kind of, and this is the other thing too, is like, I don't necessarily want to just translate my YouTube like audience towards a music audience without building a music audience. And
Yeah.
we could, I can explain. I think about the minutia of this sometimes, but like I'd rather the music grow small and organically than just kind of shill and force it.
Mhm.
So, anyways, the point is, if I invite my audience out to a show, they're expecting the YouTube value, and so yeah, it's all these things. It's like for the audience and it's for me, and it's to like talk more deeply about some of these ideas and to try like an embodied in-person experience, and also comedy. I've always enjoyed comedy, but stand-up really isn't the medium, because again, it's like jokes for jokes' sakes. I'm like, it doesn't quite do it for me. Music for music's sakes. I'm like, oh, I want to make an album, I want to make a concept. I always want to make a concept, and so this is kind of the perfect medium for me. It turns out is like this PowerPoint like philosophy lecture that's half comedy show. There's like consistent laughs through it, and I've done like kind of 3 performances of this kind of thing now, and so I'm trying to book more and just branch out in this area. It's great. Yeah, I enjoy
Yeah,
it.
it sounds really
Also,
cool.
need in-person things because I don't have social media. I don't engage. Like it was weird
Yeah.
after I did my first like solo live show, and then I just went home and I'm like, I used to be when I did concerts, like music shows, you go home and you find everyone that tagged you, you get the feedback on social media. I went home, just nothing, just cold, gray, quiet, just no feedback. I got like a few impassioned emails, which was beautiful. It was very touching. It was more long form, but
Wait, how long
I
have you
like
been on
seeing
social
people.
media for?
A while.
Yeah,
I
that's
think
really smart,
it
but
started
hard.
clicking when I was making the Bo Burnham Jeff Bezos video. At some point, it was the
Mhm.
first time where I was like, "Oh, I can't complete this with a clear conscience while still using all this stuff." And then it's just been progressive since then. Just like, okay, nuke the whole Twitter, never log into Twitter again, and then okay, deactivate Instagram. I back up all the data from all these things, just
Mhm.
close things while trying to keep the CJ the X handle so no one else gets
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, that's tough. But I mean, I like what you described with the PowerPoint thing, because I do think there's like there is a type of medium, a type of performance, a type of thing. I know that I once did a thing, and someone used the term stand-up philosopher to describe
Yeah.
it, and I hated it, but I also am like, it's probably the most accurate version, just like describing the thing that I've heard. Because I think if I tried to describe stuff, it would sound more pretentious or try-hardy. And I
That's
do think it's
almost
interesting. Oh, go
it.
ahead.
That's
Yeah,
and that's true.
yeah,
And
it's
then there's
close.
this extra element, which is the cyborg element, which is that this is now like an emergent kind of medium based on the fact that we are like, part internet. We are plugged into the internet. We have this infinite information, and we like presentations on it that are tied to a human being. We like the selection and the curation. We like memes in our education. And so that's why you have this proliferation of like, people having these PowerPoint parties and also video essayists and stuff. It's like, no, like it makes sense. We're fusing the screen with in-person human experiences, like a single actual personality we get to connect with, the kind of sacred experience of, oh, we're all going to sit our asses down and listen to whatever this is, but it could be anything. It's not like a traditional academic education. And part of the inherent glee, I think, in being kind of cultured, right? Of like someone going, here's my PowerPoint presentation just about the Twilight movies. And we're like, yeah, like I want to feel part of something, I don't know if I explained that right, but it's like three things tied together, I feel. It's like the internet things, stand-up comedy, and philosophy or education or something.
I mean, it's so weird too, though, that like it's so cool. It's cool that that's a thing. Like that makes me feel really happy to know that at least, there are human beings that want to go to a room and maybe presumably pay some money to see you do stuff like that. Like that makes me happy. The existence of those humans make me feel hopeful. And the fact that, there's times where I look at a YouTube video or a podcast or whatever that's smart, that's engaging, that's entertaining, that's pushing people to think about stuff, and I'm like, this is great. This gives me hope. And then I look at the fact that like all of the most listened to and watched stuff, especially amongst young people, and especially amongst young men, is just like weird neo-fascist stuff. And it just, it's another like tension of the modern era that I have no answer to or explanation for. And it's sort of like the hope of one thing is sometimes not canceled out, but like contradicted or complicated by the fact that people are consuming information on the other side. And I do like want there to be more people. And sometimes I feel like leftist is a limiting term to use here, but I guess like more human, progressive, left-leaning, whatever the term is.
It's like the left side of the culture war, which is almost like a different thing from even political at all. It's like, that's the thing is like, I don't know. I don't actually talk about like queer issues that much. You know what I mean? At all. It's just, I just have this really high density of queer people sometimes in my audience. And one of the big reasons is like, I don't know. It's literally just like when someone's like, oh, I'm non-binary. And I'm like, tell me more. That's it, right? It's just, it's more unusual to be like, oh, what? Like, I don't understand. I just think it's not the right side of having relationships and experiencing other people and making things for the world is when you sharply demarcate. It's one of those things in like the suits that Dimitri created for Jordan Peterson, right? Is when he's like, this is an anti-woke garment of clothing. I'm like, you're defining it as anti-woke? That's a bizarre, like, what is that, I don't want to make something that's like, I don't know, defined by what it isn't?
No.
Anyway, sorry, I don't know what I'm saying. But
No, but I get what you're saying, because I think there's a sense, too, in which, like, there's... I mean, I guess maybe this even touches on, like, the creativity or art question. I think in a sense, and again, I fall into this and I do this thing, so I say this with awareness of it. Like, I feel like often the culture war stuff gets worse when it's like the one side does the thing, and then we have to fight back to the thing, and they respond to the thing, and it's sort of like... And again, I don't hate on people that make this sort of stuff. I've been involved in this, but it's like...
Sure.
Matt Walsh makes the horrible movie and someone makes the video about why it's bad, and then Matt Walsh makes the video responding to the video about why he's bad, and someone else does the thing about that.
All of that is validating the attention economy thing. Like all that matters is we're all staring and getting angrier and angrier and staring and staring. Like it validates it when it's like someone does something like dog shit. To me, it's like someone does something ugly. And so then our reaction is to all react to the ugly thing. Everyone make content about the ugly thing. And I'm like, we're spreading ugliness. Like something we need to also create beauty. And so I don't know. I have mixed feelings about it too. Part of the Jordan Peterson, like watching it has been like watching a dark mirror of me. Like here's another kind of religious person that resonates with the non-religious a little bit. Here's another verbose kind of pseudo-intellectual academic person that people listening to. And like the biggest danger is like, when I went and saw him live, I saw him because I was doing all this research. I was like, might as well, I don't give a shit. Getting the strange sense, I'm like, I think this sold out radio music hall. Well, not sold out. I don't know. It's just radio music hall, massive audience. Everyone shows up, listens to him lecture. And I'm like, I feel like 90% of people here have no idea what he's talking about. they're enjoying the aesthetic experience of listening to someone smart speak that is on their side of the culture war. And I'm just wary. I don't want to be that person. I want to actually be applicable and useful. And I also don't want like me doing a lecture or making philosophy videos to make people go, CJ's so smart or whatever. I want it to be like you. That's why I love citing so enthusiastically, and I want to. I want people to go like, I learned something about history and humanity or philosophy that is not me. That like
Yeah.
makes me more connected to the world that I can apply here now, you know?
Well, and there's a sense too in which I think like good stuff of that medium, in a sense, I like the feeling of giving someone a tool. Like I don't
Yeah.
want to make something where someone watches the thing and they're either like, okay, I get the thing, or they're like, ooh, I'm also mad at this cultural thing, and now they've told me why I'm mad at the cultural thing. I'd
Yeah.
rather like try to provide a framework, a concept, something like that. So at the end of the thing, the person is like, ooh, now this idea I maybe didn't understand before, I can use to think about other stuff. I can use to interrogate other things. So I think in so much as like citing things is great. I think giving people a tool to work with is great. But like for there to be something that you do with it that applies to the non-digital world, or I guess the
Yeah.
digital world to a certain extent,
Yeah. Yeah.
is important. And I do think like that's why this is not to defend Mr. Peterson, but you know, the genius of some of what he has done, and this is like the 12 rules shit, it's like, hey, alienated young man, here's some stuff to do.
Yeah. Here's
Um,
something. Here's a rule set, right?
yeah. And people like
Yeah.
want to do stuff. They do want to have a sense of like the meaning of existence. And I think that giving them some sort of offering people at least like narratives or explanations from one's own life and those sorts of things, I think are both valuable counter narratives and a way to like not just make more ugly,
Yeah.
but share a bit of, even if it's like messy and not beautiful, but I feel like messy personal stuff. And I'm curious. I know I haven't been checking on the chat a ton, guys. Sorry about that. But I'm
Yeah.
curious what people think, and I'll definitely check it out later in the comments and stuff. But like, yeah, because I get why it's attractive to be angry. I get why it's attractive to watch stuff where you feel validated. But I wonder what's the sort of things that people and friends comment on this later. I'm curious like what the sort of stuff is that people consume that make you feel something and make you want to live differently and make you feel like there's some value or meaning to your life. Because yeah, I mean, I was thinking about this too because there was an interview that Hassan Piker did with one of the Pod Save America guys the other day. They're all
Uh-huh.
named John, and I forget which John it was. And it just like got into this idea or the question of like why, especially like young American men are veering so far right. Because like when you look at the demographics of Gen Z in America, you
Yeah.
sort of have, at least when you think of it in terms of men and women, like women veering way further towards like progressive POVs than previous generations. But then like Gen Z men are like further right than millennial men in all these sorts of ways. And something that, Hassan was talking about in that is, every like exercise YouTube video series or podcast, things on sports, things on how to pick up chicks, all these sorts of like cultural things are all coded in this conspiratorial right wing way.
Yeah.
And it's just sort of all over the place. And again, this isn't even a question or a positive proposal, but it's just had me thinking about like where are there opportunities in whatever small ways to not just make stuff that's like here's why these people are idiots, but make stuff that's like here's a counter narrative or a different way to think about your life and meaning and
Well,
beauty.
I think that's one of the important things is like don't cede ground. Like on the
Mhm.
idea of personal responsibility. You know what I mean? Like a concept that's like, is that right wing? What? No, what are you talking about? Personal responsibility? It's like a general fact of like it's a thing in human life, right? Don't cede ground. Like talk about that in the context of also like empathy and community building and like solidarity and like yeah, like truly, and and same with like again like Christianity or like talk about Jordan Peterson. He talks about like order and chaos. I'm like,
Mhm.
what? Just duality? Like the Taiji? Like any dual? Like no, why would I cede ground on this? Why would I like concede that like the fucking yin and yang are a right wing concept? It's like do not cede ground.
Yeah.
Care about this stuff. And so don't yeah. Anyways, yeah,
Have
that
you
I
ever done a
guess.
debate?
No, I don't
Would
know
you
if I'd be
ever?
good at it. I don't
Yeah.
know.
I don't
I
think
don't take
you.
fun in the fighting of it. Like I
Yeah.
get too relational. I just get diffusey, right? Because also,
Yeah.
even if I come across like a little like activated and confident and stuff, like a big part of that's just like trying to say something without a million caveats that take the wind out of it immediately, so that people who find it useful can actually use it. I think a lot of people like they just diffuse the valuable tools they're providing by being also I don't know and who cares and I don't know I'm like or maybe think of it a completely different way. I'm like just give them like it's like the 12 rules things like give someone something, say it, don't apologize, and then like if they discard it, that's fine. Like that saying that on top of it all, it's like if it's not useful to you, whatever.
Well, it's great because like, why would I give a shit if you don't give a shit? And if you seem like you give a shit about what you're saying, it's a more compelling reason for me to take it seriously.
Great,
Than,
right?
than the
It's no
ironic
problem.
detachment of like, who cares? Maybe this is wrong. I don't know. Whatever.
So when I talk to people, like if I'm disagreeing with somebody, like I don't know, I just don't take fun in like trying to win and like eke out the victory of it. Like I just start kind of devolving into like, why are you saying that? Like, I don't know. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm not. So
Well,
I'm saying, despite how I come across, I'm actually not too like confrontational when really having relationships with people.
yeah. Well, I have two questions, and I'll let you go. But these are
Do
really
you take
important.
questions from the audience?
Oh yeah, well, let's see. People, okay, let's say this. People in the chat, ask questions now. I'm gonna ask the CJ thing, and then in the time that I ask that, start saying stuff if you have questions, and then I will pass them on. Unless they're like real weird. If they're kind of weird, I'll ask
Hmm.
them. But if they're too weird, I won't. My question for you very simply is, I want to know the thing that you've read and the thing that you've listened to recently. They don't have to be new things that you've enjoyed the most, been the most excited about, um, liked to the point where you would want to share them?
Um, Good question. Read John McMurray's Reason and Emotion right now. I'm
Mhm.
plugging a lot because um, there's a lot of early 20th century like philosophy about like aesthetics and also about Christianity, but I would say religion, wider. Um, that I really love, but I recently found John McMurray, and he's been kind of it's like, oh, thank God, the words to hold on to this idea, the words to hold on to this feeling, like someone else. It's one of those beautiful things about like, the prescription to people like, oh, get cultured. You know what I mean? Is like, it doesn't matter what you are. It doesn't matter what you're interested in. The incredible thing is, whatever you're passionate about, somewhere in history, there's a guy that feels exactly like you. Um, it's a beautiful thing, right? So like, so for me, it's like it's been a joy to find people like this, like thinkers and writers all over the place, like the women who talked about aesthetics in the early 20th century, or like John Dewey or John McMurray, C.T. Nguyen, and I saw the most recent thing I saw was I heard Molly White talks about like a Web 3.0 critique. That's just a
Uh-huh.
tech thing. That's just an
Yeah,
answer.
that's
She
fun.
charmed the pants off me. She was really interesting. And but then for reading, it's been this John McMurray book that it's also like so approachably written. It's so beautiful. So I'd recommend people take a gander at that.
All
And
right.
then for a
I'll
lot of
give it
other
some
things
music.
for a lot of other things, to be honest, it's like I wouldn't necessarily recommend they try to read Art as Experience by
Okay.
John Dewey. Like they can,
Fair
you
enough.
can study stuff, but I think my job is to like try to take this craft seriously, so that if you believe what I say about something, then it's true. And then if you're interested in a particular thing I mentioned, you can pursue that. Like it's one of those things about, when you fearmonger about postmodern neo-Marxism, it's like anti-education. You're like discouraging curiosity. You know what I mean? You're shutting down avenues of exploration. And so I hope to be opening them up. But, if you're interested in something I say, read more about it. I try to give you all the sources, but you don't have to just blanket do
Yeah.
whatever I'm reading. Some of the
Okay.
books are hard. It's my job.
Okay. You got some questions.
All right.
I'll start at the bottom. Julia, who's our resident Toronto correspondent, said,
Torontonian, by the way, is the
yeah,
right way to say it.
Torontonian said, do you do live shows in Toronto, CJ?
Hell yeah. I did I did Danforth Comedy Bar, did their main hall. It was awesome. I'm trying to book a second one.
Hell yeah.
Here.
Is this a website thing that people should look, since you're not a social media person? Should people just check in on your website if they want to know when
You
you're doing
either
stuff?
go to my website, subscribe to the newsletter, or become a free member on my Patreon. It's just
Awesome.
mailing list. That's the only way I communicate.
All right, cool. Wow, we have an aesthetic question.
All
Clockwork
right.
Man said, how'd you decide on the under eye makeup? I love the aesthetic of it.
I don't really know. It kind of developed over time. Like it's first, I just had this sense I wanted makeup on my face in high
Yeah.
school. And so I started with big kind of dark smudges, real kind of like emo or I don't know what it was trying to evoke. And then it turned really gaudy sparkles all over the place, or like I was trying to do the winged eyeliner. At some point, this just solidified. It's so easy. And like in the morning, you pick up a palette and I use my fingers, literally just one line, second line.
That's sick.
And it just worked for me. And then I was only discovering after the fact, like, okay, what's this reminiscent of? And it's like, to try to be like, well, I want to be connected to culture, not just like, how do I learn to do this better? How do I grow here? And it's like basically a bit of queer culture and like the new romantics, like 80s pop and punk artists,
Yeah. And again, if you've ever asked that question, watch CJ's most recent video because some of this comes up there in a way that's very fun. Someone asked if you have a translation of the Bible that you prefer.
Good question. I always like oscillate between like New International and King James. That's just me personally. I was raised in like Protestant. It was just like the New International pretty much.
Yeah. Someone said, "What is a game you'd recommend to people who think games can't be art?"
Okay, well, first of all, I think whoever's arguing that, just chill.
That's good.
I don't understand that criticism. It's funny because C.T. Nguyen is a philosopher that like works in academia.
Yeah.
And so he spends a long time kind of addressing like people that maybe think that games aren't art. And he goes, well, here's arguments for why they are art. But I think a lot of people in my generation are like, of course they're art. What are you talking about? Well, you know, play BioShock? What the fuck? You never play Portal 2? You don't know how that feels? Like, what are you talking about? And C.T. Nguyen also proves this by talking about like games broadly and then video games in particular. Anyway, sorry. So I just wanted to argue against that fundamental premise because I'm just like, why do they disagree?
Yeah.
But and then in order to convince them, I don't know. Like, you mean video games or you mean something else?
I think they meant video games.
If they meant video games, I just don't understand. I'm sorry. I have a hard time
That's
even
okay.
thinking of what is the game to
Okay.
convince people. I don't even know. But I would say this one thing. I would say that a la like Susan Sontag's Against Interpretation, I would argue against convincing people that games can be art by showing a game that's a lot like a movie or something, where you go like, oh,
Yeah,
well,
yeah,
The
yeah.
Last of Us is a lot like art because it's like a movie. I'd be like, that's not the argument. Argue that games are art. Find a gamey game that is artistic because it is a game, instead of just like, when people talk about like, or like even like Good Kid, Mad City, like the Kendrick album, and they're like, it's like a movie, like that makes it better somehow. That grosses me out because that's like trying to run away from the fact it's rap music and compare it instead to something a little more prestigious and like elite, and that gets me kept feeling icky about the hegemony and class stuff. Is I'm like, it's a rap album, it's a good rap album. It's not good because it's not.
Yeah. There's a question that makes no sense to me, but it might make sense to you.
Yeah.
As a Canadian, what is the standard consumption of coffee crisp bars, and can Aero bars be substituted? That means nothing to me.
They cannot be substituted. Those are clearly
Okay.
different. Coffee Crisp has the crisp, and the Aero bars are hollow with the bubbles. It's pure chocolate. It's a texture preference, though. I admit myself, I'm really interested. I like just kind of regular dairy ass milk chocolate. Sorry,
Yeah.
I don't like ass milk came out there, which I'm gonna
Yeah.
choose as the Earl Sweatshirt song. Is it Earl Sweatshirt, Tyler? I just don't want to think about it.
Yeah. So here's an email someone wrote for you.
Email.
I might summarize some of it. It's from Dooley. It says, both of you, referring to the two of us, have motivated me to read more philosophy books these past several years. With CJ's
Oh,
recommendations on pragmatism and Wisecrack's discussion on nihilism, I've been reading some dense books. My question to both of you is, when it comes to reading, what tips would you give being able to retain a better understanding of very dense philosophy books? I annotate while reading. However, I still struggle with complete retention and comprehension. Any advice? Thanks, and take it easy. Dooley.
What do you got, Michael? I have mine, but what do you got?
My thoughts on this: read slow when you need to and don't feel any pressure to read a full book. Sometimes feel free to bounce around a bit in a philosophy book and find what you connect with. A way that I used to read is like this. What matters to me is not that I necessarily understand the first thing. What matters is eventually I find a concept or an example in a book that I do connect with, and then I use that as my like Rosetta Stone and point of orientation to kind of work backwards or outwards from. The other thing I'll say is, when I was in grad school, I always had a notebook with me when I was reading something. Whenever I read something I found really interesting, I would write it down and try to like write down what it meant to me. And I know this is boring. It's analog. It's like school. But I think most of the ideas I understood the most, it was simply by trying to like write them out and explain them to myself. So I would say if you're ever reading something and you're really struggling, try to like write about it or explain it to yourself. That's what I got. What do you got?
I think that sounds great. Both those things, like two of those things, are immediately things that I would like say also. Like one of them being that like instead of trying to think like, oh, did I get the point of this book? Like trying to get it right. Definitely like laser eye focus like for what is exciting to you. What do you agree with? What makes you feel passionate? What really resonates and seems like true or beautiful? You know, because those are the entry points to everything. I would never have. People used to tell me I was good at philosophy, but I didn't like it because every philosophy course would be like, and now we're doing Kant, and I'm like, just doing it to have done the philosophy never worked for me. I had to find what I'm passionate about, find the people that agree with you. That's the whole exciting thing. Start there, and if you find that, you do start to branch out. It kind of just goes like that because the passion begets more. Um, and then what's the other thing that you just said? Writing it down. Right. I have a study book. Yeah. Take notes like you're in
Clutch.
school. It's
Clutch.
cute. And again, like my and I can't just do that just to do that. You know, I don't like muscling it out. For me, what mattered was for me a big thing was reading Ralph Barton Perry's biography of William James, or like an abridged version, still massive. But in that, there's a ton of like the whole history is through correspondence, through written notes. And so to me, it's like the inherent beauty. Like, don't think of it like, oh, I'm studying. Just like you're generating artifacts of you thinking, of you learning, of you feeling, you know? And then you can look back on your notes. Like, it's so beautiful to me to read like Ralph Barton Perry go like, and then William James was thinking about this, which we know because we found a notebook dated at this time where he's writing notes on these lectures. It's a beautiful thing. And what's attached to that also is I think to teach someone is one of the best ways to learn. Which is explain it to yourself. Or maybe organize if I was gonna say with your friends if you have friends, like a PowerPoint, like literally, like I think that's actually a really good way is make a PowerPoint to explain to yourself because it's funner and you get to make memes and stuff. I'm actually thinking of doing PowerPoint parties as a new Patreon thing. I have to organize it, but I want to have guests be able to do that. So maybe donate to my Patreon too. But
Do it. Do it. Do it.
I,
Do it. Wait, let
I
me.
had
I'm gonna
another
give
thing
you.
too, but
Oh, go ahead.
oh yeah, last thing was like on top of all that is what was really useful for me is sometimes kind of to what you were saying, like reading a passage, if like you can read a hard passage slow and again to try to figure it out, but also you don't have to understand it. You can just be like, I don't fucking get it. Make a mark, just move on. It's really useful because you can get through books and you will find some things that are valuable. It's kind of what you already said, but it's
Yeah,
just
and
like don't
yeah,
feel you
and
need to conquer everything.
I've had the experience too of stuff just like clicks at some point. Like I spent about 10 years on and off reading like Hegel, and eventually some of it clicked, but it didn't click out of nowhere. It clicked because I think I was slowly getting it in ways I didn't know I was getting it.
Yeah,
So all I'd
yeah,
say is
yeah.
like sometimes if there's like a thinker or a set of and also too, just because the book's hard doesn't mean it's good. Just because an idea is complicated doesn't mean it's true. I think there's a lot of overwritten philosophy and theory out there. But if you're excited about something or if you think an idea is worth knowing, just don't put like a timeline on it. Um, See, now a lot of questions came in, and I got to run in a second because we got to make a video over here. Let me just, well, which one, guys? And if
Also,
I
what
don't
you
ask
said too,
yours,
also, like,
yeah.
it takes a long time to get an idea too. I think sometimes people are like, okay, I crushed that book, next book, gotta go to next book. And I'm like, most philosophers spend like their whole life on like 3 ideas. You just have to
Well,
repeat
yeah,
yourself again and
and
again.
I would say this, like, it's a better use of time if you were gonna just like this year I'm gonna understand 12 philosophers, or this year I'm just gonna read
Yeah,
Aristotle. Just read Aristotle.
way better.
Because
Yeah, way better.
then if you just understand Aristotle, you'll start reading other stuff and you'll be like, oh, it's like that thing in Aristotle. And this is like
Exactly.
for
And then you start
me,
to compare, and then
yeah.
yeah.
And I was the worst because when I was in college, I got into like theory stuff first. So I was trying to read like Derrida and Foucault and Judith Butler. And then years later, then I went back and read like Greek philosophy and I was like, oh, all that stuff is based, it's there.
It's
They're
just there.
they're talking about that stuff.
Yeah.
Which, God, let's see. I'll just ask, well, there was one question I was going to ask you. Oh, yeah, I'll do this one. And guys, I'm so sorry for those of you who don't ask your questions. You're all great. I love you all. And most of you, I would get in a fist fight to defend your honor because it's a good use of my remaining toxic masculinity. Are there any more art sins? Someone asked that question for you.
You know,
That's a real
sometimes people
CJ
will
head
come up
question.
to me. Sometimes people will come up to me and they'll be like, I'm dealing with sloth. Like they'll reference my art sins, and I'm like,
Mhm.
I don't remember which one that is. This is the framing devices. This is what
Yeah.
you're talking about. A lot of these could be a lot of other things. You know that, right? Like, they're kind of just selections.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't say there's some particular art sin that is the worst or anything.
Yeah.
The only main thing I would say is like a la the kind of theological things we were saying before. The art sins are just ways for people to understand ways that they mistreat themselves sometimes in the creative process.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it.
Amazing. Well, here, we'll wind down from that here. You've been with us for over 2 hours.
It was
Really
fun.
appreciate it. And truly, like, CJ, like, genuinely, this has been so much fun. I'm going to be thinking about stuff. There's all these conversations, and I'm going to be thinking about other stuff. So thank you for hanging out. And then everyone who's here, friends, if you are not on the train, subscribe to CJ's channel, go over to the Patreon, and you know what? Like, look at the Patreon and think to yourself, where are ways that I spend money every month? And what would it mean? You're not saying I'm saying this. You're not saying this. You would
Okay,
never
I
speak like this.
know.
You would never speak like this. And just think to
No.
yourself, like, you know, what is a few dollars? I don't know. Just think. I'm asking you to have a thought experiment with yourself when you're hovering over those things. CJ is not saying to do this. CJ is uncomfortable that I'm saying this. They don't want you to do this. I want you to do this. And then if you haven't already, we posted the link in the chat a bunch. We can do it again. Do check out CJ's newest video that came out today. It's really good. Don't watch it when you're driving. Sit down.
Dangerous.
You fucking
Not good.
deserve it.
Yeah.
And watch it on
Yeah.
if you have YouTube on your TV, watch it on a TV. Why not? You know, you stare at your
Yeah.
fucking phone all day. Well, hopefully we do this again. I feel like
would love to.
it's probably a little over a year ago we chatted. Maybe we can try to get the next
Make it
two
annual.
sooner. Yeah.
Or not sooner. So I'm
Yeah, no,
happy
at
with
least
sooner.
annual at worst. Annual at worst.
We didn't even talk about your sweater. We just did Vampire Weekend's latest album as and my album of the month on Patreon. We just
It's
I
such
just
a good
listened to it.
record. It was
Beautiful.
fine. It's like the first day in a while it's been cool enough in LA to wear a long sleeve t-shirt. I got this
Yeah.
shirt at their show in LA, and my wife was like, "You're buying a long sleeve t-shirt in summer." And I was like, "I know what I'm doing."
I'm thinking
Yeah.
further in the future.
Thinking ahead. But yes, well, the next time we'll have to only talk music and leave all this boring religion, theory, philosophy shit behind.
Yeah, we didn't talk about hip hop. I want to talk about 90s hip hop with you.
Oh my God. Let's do that sometime. Let's talk before a year. We can talk at your house or mine. I don't care. And just build the parameters, 90s hip hop, and that's it.
Yeah, what do you got? Underrated, like top like underrated rappers that are like you think are secretly the best. I'll give you Cool G Rap, Big Pun, and Black Thought.
Okay, Big Pun is one of the best to ever do it. His flow and his cadence, immaculate. Black Thought at a peak, I totally agree. I think Diamond D, from the beginning of the grades, I think Diamond D is underrated, and I think some of Diamond D's production is unreal. I think he's kind of gotten lost in the sauce a little bit as a producer.
Yeah.
I think that, I'm a big like early Raucous Records head.
Yeah.
I think like if you can, some of like even the pre-Black Star, Mos Def and Talib Kweli stuff is very nuts.
Yeah.
And then I also think one of my favorite groups ever is De La Soul.
Yeah.
I think one of their more like controversial records in some circles is Stakes is High.
Oh yeah.
I love Stakes is High, and I in particular love it because it's, early-ish Jay Dilla production.
Yeah.
And I think I think like there's elements of Stakes is High that show where hip hop is going or what it's capable of. And I think lyrically as well, it's dealing with themes that made people mad at the time. But I feel like Stakes is High is asking questions about what it means to make hip hop music and what it means to witness hip hop becoming more like commodified. And I think that the way they like grapple with that is just so interesting.
That's beautiful. That's sick as hell. I Slum Village for me is like my early Dilla kind of forgotten.
Don't even get me going on that.
I will talk again sometime.
Well, I'll say, and then Brownsville, is it Ka how you say it? Who died this week?
Yeah. Ka.
Truly, like, if you guys just like lyrics, if you want to like listen to a rapper where you have to pause and be like, was that a octuple entendre in that bar or whatever? Just amazing. Okay, let's do this again soon though, because I think this could just go for a while.
Oh yeah. I just wanted to get bitten.
Our producer just showed up with the look that was like, okay, Michael, we gotta make a YouTube video. We're gonna make a YouTube video. Okay, so good talking to you.
So good talking to you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it was a blessing.
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you.
See you, DJ.
Bye.
Awesome. Guys, that was CJ the X. That was a long conversation. Thank you for hanging out. I enjoyed the shit out of that. So sorry for, I know some of you are asking questions that we didn't get into there, but I feel like I could talk to CJ forever and ever. Couple things before we go. Most important thing, I want to announce the winner of the coffee contest. Okay? The winner, and let me make sure I get the name right on this. And here's the thing. It was really hard. So let's maybe watch we don't have a watch together, so we'll save one of these for later. Let's watch two of the finalists right now, the two finalists, and I'm going to show the runner-up first. And if you're still here, yeah, okay, okay, guys, okay, I'm going to count this in, and I want to say sorry, Ann Porkins, if you're still here, I love you. You got runner-up this time, but this is so good. So let's watch Porkins video. Oh, here, let me pull it up on my end too so we can do the count in. Oh wait, hold on. Okay. Oh, pause. Okay. 3, 2, 1. Coffee contest. Coffee contest. Now, we're gonna take a quick break because I want to tell you about something that we're doing. I said that we're gonna start giving away Yes Please coffee, and we are. And here's how we're doing it. Amazing. Porkins really crushed it. You're gonna tell us how you love your coffee, why you like coffee, and then the turn it takes here, guys. You're not ready for this. So you didn't see this coming.
Everybody, can I have your attention for 1 second, please?
Check this out.
We have a very special guest with us here today.
A Porkins brand.
Please, let's see if we can get him up here.
And Porkins.
Inside,
Me,
inside,
me,
inside,
me,
inside,
me,
inside,
me,
inside,
me,
inside.
me.
Because that's why I didn't make it. Okay. And then let's watch the winner now. This is from hopefully I say her name right. Hanji or Hanji Chang. And this one also involves Russell Brand. It's shorter, and I will play it and I'll tell you why this is the one that finally that won. Can I count it down? 3. It's a coffee without tyranny. There's no vaccinations in here. It's not from a PD party or anything like that. It's just good coffee. That is our winner. I'll tell you what pushed it over the edge. Tony from Yes Please, who I sent some of these to, and for him it was the shooting of the Tesla. That's what he said pushed him over the edge. But we got great essays we got stuff from Dylan. We got a really nice story from Logan. We have Kai had something. Porkins also made some really good memes. Elias wrote a nice little thing I liked. NW Boucher has a YouTube short. I'll actually post that in the chat real quick. So you guys can check this out if you want. That's one of the submissions. And then I'll show you where Eddie did an amazing drawing. So thank you so much to our guy Eddie. And I'll post it. I'm just the ones that have links, I'm just posting them in there so you can check these out as well. It was so hard to decide. But I will say we're gonna keep doing it every couple weeks. So Hanji, you're here. So glad you saw that. So guys, and then Hanji, I'm gonna email you and then you'll send me your address, and then I'll send it to Yes Please, and they'll send you coffee. Again, this is all for our friends at Yes Please. I appreciate how creative you are. Maybe on Monday we'll watch some more of these if people are cool with it. I realize I didn't ask for consent, by the way. I did not ask you if I could show those, and I did. So I apologize. In the future, if anyone does want to upload them to YouTube, it makes them easier to watch. But those are from our friends at Yes Please. Yes Please Coffee, 20% off with code Wisecrack. We're going to run the contest back, but I'll wait till Monday to talk about that again. Reminder, check out the Verso Books thing. I'll post the link in the chat again. You get 50% off Verso Books with the code Wisecrack. Let's do that. And then finally, shouts to CJ. Please do stop the count. Go check out CJ's channel if you haven't already. Leave comments if you're watching this after the fact, if you still have questions or thoughts on any of this. Thank you so much to producer Henry for holding it all down. And we will be back Monday for a more normal show. So I'll see you guys then.
Have a good weekend, y'all. See you Monday.